is the situation concerning the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representatives of Angola, Burundi, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Rwanda, South Africa, and Uruguay to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. On behalf of the Council, I welcome Her Excellency Ms. Thérèse Kwamba Wagner, State Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Cooperation and Francophonie of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the following briefers to participate in this meeting. Ms. Bintou Keita, Special Representative of the Secretary General and Head of the United Nations Organization Stabilization Mission in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Monsieur Jean-Pierre Lacroix, Under Secretary General for Peace Operation, and Mrs. Joyce Msuya, Assistant Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Deputy Emergency Relief Coordinator. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration for item 2 of the agenda. I now give the floor to Jean-Pierre Lacroix.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President, distinguished members of the Security Council, Minister of State and Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Permanent Representative of Rwanda, and other distinguished ambassadors and representatives. I'd like to thank the Security Council for giving me this opportunity to take the floor on this prevailing situation in the east of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. I'll make a brief opening statement before my colleagues Bintou Keita and Joyce Msuya. As was discussed with the presidency of the Security Council, due to previous commitments in the context of an official visit to the Syrian Arab Republic, I won't be able to participate in all of the meetings, so I would like to ask for pardon from the members of the Security Council through you, Mr. President. Today's meeting is being held in a context of serious deterioration in the situation in the east of the DRC. Since the beginning of the year, the M23 has launched large-scale offensive operations in the east of the DRC with the support of the Rwandan armed forces. These actions has allowed them to extend their territorial gains significantly over a few weeks, while opening a new front in South Kivu, where MONUSCO withdrew recently. The United Nations is profoundly concerned by the resumption of hostilities, which has led to the loss of a strategic position several kilometers from Goma. In this regard, I refer to the statement of the Secretary General on this topic, which has just been published, and I would invite the members of the Council and other participants to consult this. On the 23rd and 24th of January, the M23 fired on MONUSCO and Sami DRC positions. Over the last 48 hours, 2 MONUSCO blue helmets belonging to South African contingents and a Uruguayan blue helmet were killed in carrying out the tasks entrusted to them by this council. I recall that this mandate is focused on the protection of civilians and focusing on combating armed groups in the DRC. Other blue helmets were wounded and have been cared for in UN hospitals in Goma. SADC forces, that the MONUSCO forces also assist, have also suffered injuries. There have also been significant injuries and displacement among the civilian population in an already extremely difficult context. I'd like to take this opportunity to express on behalf of the Secretary General of the United Nations our deepest condolences to the families of the fallen blue helmets and also to the Uruguayan and other forces. And I also express my condolences to the families of the victims. I pay tribute to all MONUSCO blue helmets carrying out their work against the threats against them at the moment. And I wish to recall that the threats against blue helmets and civilian personnel of the United Nations can represent war crimes.
Members of the Council, with the fate of Goma and its millions of inhabitants hanging in the balance, MONUSCO has shown admirable resolve in delivering on its protection of civilians mandate, often at great cost, while doing its utmost to ensure the safety and security of UN personnel. To this end, MONUSCO has reinforced its blocking positions in coordination with the FRADC and Sami DRC to prevent the M23's further advance towards Goma. Steps have also been taken to ensure the swift resupply of UN contingents based in M23 controlled areas, notably in Kiwanja, Kanyabayonga, and Kichanga. The mission has activated contingency measures to facilitate CASEVAC and MEDEVAC procedures as required. SRG Bintou Keita will provide further details on the steps being taken by the mission to deliver on its mandated responsibilities while doing its utmost ensuring the safety of UN personnel and installation. Mr. President, at this critical juncture, with the lives of countless vulnerable civilians, peacekeepers, and the respect of this Council's mandate at stake, MONUSCO remains committed to the robust defense of its mandate under very challenging conditions. The Council must honor the sacrifice made by the peacekeepers who have laid down their lives in pursuit of this noble goal by sending a clear and unequivocal message to the M23 and its backers that actions endangering the lives of civilians and UN peacekeepers will not be tolerated. All parties to the conflict must abide by international humanitarian law. Monsieur le Président, distingués membres du...
Mr. President, distinguished members of the Council, it's essential for the M23 to cease its activities and withdraw from occupied territory. A violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the DRC is a violation of the fundamental principles of international law and the UN Charter. The United Nations will continue to cooperate with the main actors to encourage the parties to resume negotiations in the framework of the Luanda process that the United Nations fully supports. In this context, I want to recall the significant progress that has been achieved over the past few months as part of this process. It's very important for these achievements not to be lost. The withdrawal of the Rwandan forces from the east of the DRC has to be effective. The plan of neutralizing the FDLR must be implemented, and the mechanisms of strengthened ad hoc verification must be fully operational. The populations threatened by this offensive of the M23 and the contributing countries that have made their peacekeepers available for the UN to ensure their protection expect a firm response from this Council to establish an environment conducive to the restoration of the political process. It is still possible to avoid the worst as long as this Council acts without any further delay. Thank you.
I thank Mr. Lacroix for his briefing. I now give the floor to Ms. Bintou Keita.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished members of the Security Council, thank you for convening this urgent meeting today to discuss the alarming developments in Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. On 23rd January, the military governor of North Kivu, General Peter Chirimwami, was wounded on the battlefield and subsequently passed away. So far, MONUSCO has lost 3 peacekeepers trying to protect Sake and Goma from the M23's advance. I would like to express my condolences to the Democratic Republic of the Congo government, people, as well as to the governments of the troop contributing countries, to those who were killed while implementing the mission's mandate. I also wish a swift recovery to those injured, including our 11 MONUSCO peacekeepers. Today, despite ongoing MONUSCO support to FRDC, M23 and Rwandan forces penetrated Munigi, captured in the outskirts of Goma city, causing mass panic and flight among the population. Roads are blocked and the airport can no longer be used for evacuation or humanitarian efforts. M23 has declared the airspace over Goma closed. In other words, we are trapped. I call on this council to act now to secure the civilian population, humanitarian aid workers, and all United Nations personnel. Mr. President, when I presented the last report of the Secretary General on the situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo on 9 December, the 23rd March Movement M23, with the active support of the Rwandan armed forces, had consolidated its occupation in North Kivu province, doubling its controlled territory compared to 2012. Today, M23 has expanded its control in North Kivu and extended its advance into South Kivu province, from which MONUSCO withdrew in June 2024. It has received reinforcement and supplies to strengthen its position along several axes, both south and north of Goma. It notably deployed a heavy presence near Sake, 25 kilometers west of Goma, and is advancing in Munigi, 9 kilometers north of Goma. In line with its protection of civilians mandate, MONUSCO has enhanced its support to the armed forces of the Democratic Republic of Congo, FRDC, by sharing information, participating in joint tactical planning, and actively participating in combat, along with SADC mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo, SAMI-DRC. MONUSCO has notably activated Operation Springbok 3 and deployed 1 quick reaction force, 1 rapid deployment battalion, a reserve battalion, a platoon size of special forces, and an artillery battery to reinforce its position to counter M23's advance. In a context of permanent movement of population fleeing for their lives or used as human shields, the military response, especially the use of MONUSCO artillery, is being carefully calibrated to avoid harming civilians and our forces on the ground, or damaging civilian facilities. The United Nations also temporarily relocate non-essential personnel from Goma. These efforts are still underway. This measure aims to guarantee the safety of personnel while maintaining essential United Nations operations in the province. This relocation in no way affects the unwavering commitment of the United Nations to provide humanitarian aid and protect civilians in North Kivu. GPS jamming, and spoofing incidents have resumed more intensely than ever before. These attacks hamper the protection of civilians and the safety and security of United Nations personnel. The mission stands ready to provide documentation in support of the Democratic Republic of Congo's complaint to the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, and encourage member states the same. While MONUSCO's robust posture in support of FRDC and SAMI DRC has helped counter mis- and disinformation, the Congolese authorities and MONUSCO continue to coordinate joint communication and ensure clear, unified messaging. Nevertheless, I must draw the Council's attention to a troubling rise in targeted hate speech led by M23-affiliated online campaigns. Their hateful rhetoric targets me as special representative of the Secretary General, but also the mission spokesperson who has received threats of sexual violence. I call on the Congolese authorities to clearly condemn hate speech that targets especially human rights defenders and civil society actors. So far, at least 32 human rights defenders have approached MONUSCO for protection measures. In response, the mission implements individual protection mechanisms with human rights networks. Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President, more than ever, we must find a political solution. A displaced person from North Kivu recently insisted that even the Second World War ended thanks to dialogue. So I would like to call on the DRC and Rwanda to continue political negotiations in the context of the Luanda process. In this regard, hostile rhetoric and mutual accusations must end to make way for discussions and constructive steps. I welcome the efforts of the international community to preserve this process, above all after the aborted summit of the 15th of December 2024. Specifically, I also call on Rwanda to withdraw its forces from the Congolese territory, to end its support for the M23, and to, as soon as possible, deploy its delegates to the ad hoc strengthened verification mechanism to join the members from Angola and the DRC. I also call on the DRC to make significant efforts to neutralize the FDLR. I reaffirm MONUSCO's commitment to supporting these efforts under the context of its mandate. In parallel, I encourage close synergies between the Luanda process and the Nairobi process, which is currently being revitalized. This to promote notable progress, we must make concessions, particularly the M23 must immediately withdraw towards the pre-4th of August positions. I call on all parties to respect their obligations to protect civilians in full respect for international humanitarian law and international human rights law. Civilian infrastructure providing essential services to civilians must also never be targeted. President, as Angola is preparing to preside over the African Union in February, I support a second SADC quadripartite summit involving SADC, the International Conference of the Great Lakes Region, the Economic Community of Central African States, ECAS, and the East African Community, the EAC, to strengthen these peace efforts. It's also crucial to urgently convene a fresh tripartite summit between the UNHCR, the DRC, and Rwanda. Furthermore, it's essential to ensure that the 12th summit of the regional follow-up mechanism of the African Union Peace and Security Council is held, to relaunch the framework agreement for peace, security and cooperation. I encourage the Angolan presidency of the African Union to promote the inclusion of women in peace initiatives. In the DRC, this could involve the implementation of a national strategy for positive masculinity, as well as the establishment of an interministerial committee and national council on gender and parity, provided for both in the law of 2015 on parity. President, MONUSCO is supporting efforts to hold all of those responsible for human rights violations accountable. It is, in addition, important to identify victims to ensure that justice can be done to them, while also curbing the risk that violence, including gender-based violence, is repeated. In addition, international warrants must be issued against those that are fueling insecurity and committing human rights and IHL violations, particularly with the Special Envoy for the region of the Great Lakes region, Ambassador Huang Zia. I call on the Council to take decisive steps, including targeted sanctions against the perpetrators of violations. No exception must be made. Thank you.
I thank Ms. Keita for her briefing. I now give the floor to Ms. Joyce Msuya.
Mr. President, distinguished members of the Security Council, thank you for this opportunity to brief the Council on the humanitarian situation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Mr. President, the crisis in Eastern DRC is at a dangerous point. The situation is deteriorating rapidly, and if hostilities spill into Goma, a densely populated urban center, the impact on civilians could be devastating. More than 21 million people already need aid across the country, one of the highest numbers worldwide. Approximately 1 million people had already sought refuge in neighboring countries. The escalation in the east threatens to make a critical humanitarian situation even worse. In North and South Kivu, hundreds of civilians have been killed and injured in the last few weeks. Hundreds of thousands have fled their homes or shelters, often multiple times, to escape gunfire and shelling, especially around Sake and Minova. Humanitarian access remains constrained due to insecurity. Hospitals, including Dosho and Kieshero in Goma, are overwhelmed. Medical facilities in Minova are also struggling to tend to the hundreds of people in need of treatment for gunshot and shrapnel wounds. Bombings in overcrowded displacement sites in and around Sake and Minova have resulted in casualties, including among children, and destroyed shelters, causing panic and further displacement. I'm particularly concerned about the impact on women and girls. We already know that gender-based violence increased by 300% in recent years, and that 2/3 of all cases had occurred in 3 eastern provinces of North Kivu, South Kivu, and Ituri. Mr. President, the Secretary General has emphasized the importance of upholding international humanitarian and human rights law and ensuring immediate and unimpeded humanitarian access to populations in need. I reiterate this call. We urge all parties to protect civilians and critical infrastructure they rely on, respect the civilian nature of displacement sites, and avoid using wide-area explosives and heavy weapons in populated areas. This will be particularly important should the hostilities spread into Goma, given the risks of conflict in urban areas. All parties must take constant care to spare civilians and civilian objects throughout military operations. Mr. President, in these challenging circumstances, our humanitarian partners have bravely and tirelessly continued their efforts to enable life-saving operations by negotiating access, including by providing critical care through our partners, particularly NGOs that deliver medical and food assistance. Council members, to address this escalating humanitarian crisis before the situation worsens further, I have three asks to the Council. First, I urge this Council and all Member States to leverage their influence to ensure that international humanitarian law is respected by all parties. Civilians must be protected. IDP sites and medical facilities must be protected. Rapid, unimpeded, and safe humanitarian access to those in need must be facilitated. Second, since we are at the start of the year and many funding sources remain unavailable or delayed for various reasons, adequate funding is essential to enable and sustain urgent humanitarian action. In light of the scale and severity of the current situation, we are allocating $17 million from the Central Emergency Response Fund for immediate life-saving interventions. However, let's be clear, additional resources are urgently needed. Third, I urge the Council and all Member States to use their influence to end the hostilities. The scale of suffering in the DRC demands urgent attention. The plight of the country's women, men, and children cannot continue to go unnoticed. Thank you.
I thank Mrs. Msuya for her briefing. I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make a statement. I give the floor to the representative of France.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. President, I'd like to begin by thanking the US Chief for Peace Operations, the Special Representative of the Secretary General, and the Assistant Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs. I welcome here the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The Security Council is meeting today due to the rapid deterioration of the situation in North Kivu in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the capture of Sake and the encircling of Goma by the M23, enabled by the active support of the Rwandan Defense Forces. The situation is serious, and this Council must take stock of it. France reaffirms its solidarity towards the Democratic Republic of the Congo and its unwavering commitment to its territorial integrity and sovereignty. We express our deep concern with regard to the dangerous escalation of the conflict in North Kivu around Goma, and we firmly condemn the ongoing offensive caused by the M23, actively supported by Rwanda. The presence in the DRC of foreign military forces against the will of the Congolese authorities is a clear violation of the United Nations Charter. This offensive, as well as the support to arms groups by all parties, causes a major risk to the protection of the civilian population and is contributing to the displacement of tens of thousands of civilians. The M23 must immediately cease its offensive and withdraw from the territory that it has taken control of. France urgently calls for a return of the ceasefire and a resumption of dialogue. There is no military outcome for this conflict. The President of the Republic, Emmanuel Macron, recalled this yesterday to President Kagame and Tshisekedi, with whom he held meetings. The dialogue undertaken with regard to under the Nairobi and Luanda processes, with the full support of France, must resume without delay. A political process must also resume. France stands ready to support it. Force is not an option here. In this context, France calls for a withdrawal of forces from the DRC territory and the dismantlement of these forces under the commitments made by Rwanda under the Luanda process. Finally, France expresses its full support to MONUSCO, which is playing a crucial role for the protection of civilians, whose mandate has been unanimously renewed on the 20th of December last year. We roundly condemn the attacks undertaken by the M23 against MONUSCO, which has already led to the death of several blue helmets over the last few days. We recall that attacks against blue helmets may represent war crimes. We pay tribute to the bravery of MONUSCO troops, and we pay our condolences to the families of the victims, to South Africa, to Uruguay, and to Malawi. France also condemns all measures that are hampering MONUSCO's ability to fully undertake its mandate, particularly the deployment of soil-to-air missile systems and GPS systems in the M23 controlled areas with the direct support of the Rwandan armed forces. President, the reactions of the international community must be commensurate with the humanitarian and political consequences caused by the ongoing offensive by the M23, supported by the Rwandan armed forces. France calls on all of the Security Council to mobilize and to unanimously condemn this serious threat to peace, regional peace and security, and international peace and security, as the United Nations Secretary General once again has done this morning in very clear terms. Thank you.
I thank the representative of France for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Sierra Leone.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the A3+ members, Algeria, Guyana, Somalia, and my country, Sierra Leone. We are deeply grateful to USG Jean-Pierre Lacroix, SISG Ms. Bintou Keita, and ASG Joyce Msuya for their thorough and detailed account of the alarming situation in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. We also warmly welcome the participation of Her Excellency Therese Kaikwamba Wagner, Foreign Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the representatives of Rwanda, Angola, Uruguay, South Africa, and Burundi at this important emergency meeting. At the outset, we extend our heartfelt condolences to the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo and the family of General Peter Chiriwami, Governor of North Kivu. Our thoughts are also with the families of the fallen U.S. peacekeepers and the SAMI DRC contingent. We wish a speedy and full recovery to all those injured. We express our unwavering solidarity with the United Nations and humanitarian actors on the ground who continue their essential work under incredibly difficult and dangerous conditions. Mr. President, in recent days, the A3+ has been actively engaging with a broad range of stakeholders to assess how the UN Security Council can best assist the Congolese people in bringing an end to the violence in Eastern DRC following the breach of the ceasefire by the M23 AFC. Our consultations with the government of the DRC and Rwanda, alongside discussions with the UN Secretariat, has reinforced a singular, undeniable conclusion. The resolution of the conflict in Eastern DRC must be political, not military. In this context, we affirm that the Luanda and Nairobi processes remain viable paths to peace. Let us be clear. While we advocate for a political solution, the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Democratic Republic of Congo must be respected by all state and non-state actors alike. In light of the recent development in the DRC, the A3+ would like to underscore the following key points. First, we unequivocally condemn the killing of MONUSCO peacekeepers and Sami DRC military personnel during the current offensive by the M23 AFC rebel group. We commend MONUSCO for maintaining its defensive posture in protecting civilians and fulfilling its mandate. We call for continued coordination between MONUSCO, FARDC, and Sami DRC in line with their mandates and relevant Security Council resolutions. We also strongly condemn the spoofing and jamming of GPS signals used by MONUSCO and demand that the M23/AFC cease such disruptive activities. While the international community rightfully focuses on evacuating its citizens, diplomats, and staff, we must not forget the safety and security of the Congolese people who have nowhere to seek refuge. The protection of millions of Congolese civilians remains a top priority for the A3+, and we urge MONUSCO to continue its vital role in safeguarding both the population and critical infrastructure in Goma. Second, we call on the M23 AFC rebels to immediately cease hostilities, halt their offensive, and return to their designated pre-cantonment areas. The M23 AFC must engage through the Nairobi process and silence their guns. As we have stated, the ultimate resolution to the conflict in Eastern DRC lies in political dialogue. In light of recent development, the A3+ calls on all parties to engage meaningfully and in good faith in order to create the conditions for peace. In this context, we call on the government of the DRC to engage in good faith with all relevant stakeholders and commit to the neutralization of the FDLR as outlined in the harmonized plan within the framework of the Luanda process. We call on the government of the DRC and the government of Rwanda to return without preconditions to the diplomatic talks under the Luanda process to achieve a lasting and peaceful resolution of the conflict in the region, including by addressing respective issues pertaining to the neutralization of the FDLR and disengagement of the forces outside the territory of the DRC. Third, we strongly urge those who continue to support the M23's advancement to immediately cease such assistance, as it undermines the long-term peace and stability of both the DRC and the border region. We are deeply concerned about the January 25th communique from the M23 AFC, which can only exacerbate tensions and undermine prospects for peace. The government of the DRC must receive our collective support as a council in its effort to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity and to ensure the protection of its people. Further, we urge this council to work strenuously to promote meaningful engagement, to de-escalate tensions, and to avoid attributing blame to the parties to the conflict. We further urge proactive support for the Luanda and Nairobi processes. This includes ensuring that no external actors, intentionally or unintentionally, contribute to the perpetration of the conflict between Rwanda and the DRC, including through the provision of weaponry and other resources. Fourth, we emphasize the urgent need to resume the Nairobi process. We call on the DRC government to be fully committed to the process, and we encourage continued African leadership for engaging all relevant stakeholders and revitalizing the process with the full backing of the international community. Mr. President, as we call for an end to the M23 AFC offensive, the international community must take immediate action to support MONUSCO in alleviating the severe humanitarian crisis in Eastern DRC. According to OCHA, there are currently 6.5 million displaced persons in the country, with over 34,000 newly displaced individuals seeking refuge around Goma. Emergency hospitals in Goma are overwhelmed, with more than 290 individuals wounded, including 90 civilians, many of whom have life-threatening injuries. We must rally behind MONUSCO and other UN agencies to provide vital medical assistance. We are deeply concerned that 80% of Goma's electricity and water supply has been damaged due to the M23 AFC offensive. Furthermore, 400,000 children are currently out of school as a result of the closure of educational institutions in the region. In closing, Mr. President, we wish to express our gratitude to His Excellency President João Lourenço of Angola and former President Uhuru Kenyatta of Kenya for their unwavering commitment to peace in Eastern DRC and their important contributions under the Luanda and Nairobi processes, respectively. We also echo the call of His Excellency Mustafaki, chairpersons of the African Union Commission, urging all parties to engage in the ongoing peace efforts under the auspices of the Luanda and Nairobi processes. And I thank you.
I thank the representative of Sierra Leone for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of United States.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to today's briefers, and in particular to SRSG Keita for your steadfast leadership of MONUSCO amid a clear and deliberate escalation of the conflict in Eastern DRC. Thank you also to ASG Msuya, and I welcome the participation of the DRC Minister of Foreign Affairs in this meeting. Colleagues, we condemn in the strongest terms Rwanda's and M23's hostilities on Goma and attacks on Sake. We urgently call for a ceasefire and an end to this fighting, which has endangered civilians and further displaced tens of thousands more as hundreds of thousands flee the fighting. The United States commends the MONUSCO leadership for taking such robust steps to defend Sake and Goma from Rwanda and M23's advances. We express our deepest condolences to the families of all of the peacekeepers lost during these attacks, and we commend all MONUSCO personnel for their bravery in protecting civilians during this ongoing assault. Rwanda's use of advanced weaponry and systems, including GPS jamming and spoofing, have interfered with the humanitarian response, endangered MONUSCO, and continue to endanger those fleeing from the violence. These actions must stop immediately. The indiscriminate use of artillery has endangered civilians, with bombs falling on and near IDP sites. Congolese and Rwandan leadership, as well as leaders of the M23 and other armed groups, must issue clear orders not to target civilians and to respect the civilian character of IDP sites. Colleagues, there is no military solution to the conflict in Eastern DRC. To achieve a durable peace, all parties must honor their commitments to the Luanda process and the terms laid out by Angolan President Lourenço and return to the negotiating table. We call for the swift operationalization of the reinforced ad hoc verification mechanism. We also support the efforts of former President Kenyatta to mediate with M23. All sides of this conflict must respect the ceasefire in place since August and act swiftly to end this fighting. We call on all partners in the Great Lakes region to use the diplomatic tools at their disposal to reinforce this message. All actors must also respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the DRC and put an end to all forms of support to armed groups, whether Congolese or foreign. All parties must uphold human rights and international humanitarian law and ensure immediate and unfettered access to populations in need of humanitarian assistance. The United States remains alarmed by the findings of the recent report of the UN Group of Experts detailing the consolidation of parallel administrations, forced recruitments, and the illicit exploitation of mining areas in M23-controlled territories. And we reiterate in unequivocal terms our condemnation of hate speech and xenophobia, as well as ethnic-based politics. The United States will consider all the tools at its disposal in order to hold accountable those responsible for sustaining armed conflict, instability, and insecurity in the DRC. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United States for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Greece.
Thank you, Mr. President. We thank USG Lacroix, SRSG Ms. Keita and ASG Ms. Msuya for briefing us on this urgent meeting today. I would also like to welcome the participation of the Honourable Foreign Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo in our meeting. Greece commends SRSG Keita and MONUSCO for the continued efforts in these extremely difficult circumstances amidst the escalating crisis in the region. We follow developments closely also through our embassy in Kinshasa, since we have also Greek citizens residing in Goma. Allow me to emphasize 4 key points. First, we strongly condemn the recent flagrant violation of the ceasefire and the subsequent M23's further advance in North Kivu. M23 must reverse the territorial expansion immediately and hold the encirclement of the town of Goma. Threats by M23 of seizing Goma are completely unacceptable. Moreover, as the Secretary General stressed also in his today's statements, the presence of Rwandan troops on Congolese soil and the support to the M23 are very concerning. We call on Rwanda to cease its support for the M23 and to withdraw its forces now, and we reiterate that the sovereignty, unity and territorial integrity of the DRC must be fully respected. Second, in the next stage, peace cannot be attained without the withdrawal of Rwandan forces and the neutralization of the FDLR by the DRC. It is more imperative than ever that both DRC and particularly Rwanda commit to the ceasefire, re-engage sincerely in the political dialogue, and implement all decisions and commitments agreed under the Luanda process. We commend Angola's President Lorenzo for his continued efforts for peace, and we believe that he deserved the Council's support. As a point of principle, my country, Greece, believes that and supports that African-led solutions are needed to address African issues. Third, the Council ought to focus on humanitarian conditions, especially in North Kivu, that remain very dire. All parties must respect international humanitarian law and ensure unrestricted humanitarian access. Fourth, we express our deepest condolences to the families of the peacekeepers killed and to the troop contributing countries, South Africa, Malawi and Uruguay. We hope for a speedy recovery of the peacekeepers injured. We emphasize that attacks against peacekeepers may constitute potential war crimes and that attacks against MONUSCO peacekeepers form also a basis for sanctions designations. Finally, MONUSCO must be granted full access and freedom of movement to effectively fulfill its mandate and address urgent needs. The protection of civilians and humanitarian personnel must remain an absolute priority. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Greece for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Slovenia.
Thank you, President. I thank USG Lacroix, Special Representative Keita, and ASG Msuya for their updates on the alarming situation in the Eastern DRC. No words could truly capture the depth and gravity of the situation that we are witnessing in North Kivu as we speak. We must not and we cannot remain indifferent or silent to what is happening. Mr. President, Slovenia is deeply alarmed by the recent rapid escalation of violence in the Eastern DRC. The seizure of vast territories, the displacement of hundreds of thousands of civilians, and the blatant violation of international law are direct assault on regional peace and stability. They undermine the Luanda and Nairobi processes and constitute breach of the ceasefire agreements. The capture of Minova and Sake alongside the looming threat of Goma raises deep alarm and carries catastrophic security and humanitarian consequences. We categorically condemn the actions of the M23 and demand the immediate cessation of all hostilities. We call on them to immediately stop attacks on Goma and halt any plans to seize any part of entire city. We call for the full and unconditional withdrawal of the forces from the territories that they have seized. We reiterate our strong call on Rwanda to immediately cease its support to M23 and fully withdraw its forces from the DRC territory. Any unauthorized military presence in the DRC is a flagrant violation of international law, the UN Charter, and the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the DRC. At the same time, we urge the DRC to cease all cooperation with the FDLR and other armed groups, honoring their commitments under international law and regional arrangements. We urge Rwanda and the DRC to take decisive actions to de-escalate tensions in their relations, to re-engage in dialogue, and place the highest priority on peace, stability, and the well-being of the region. The consequences of displacement are severe. Concerns over heightened vulnerability of women and children facing the abhorrent risk of sexual and gender-based violence are high. We strongly warn against deepening ethnic divisions, including hate speech. We remind all parties of their obligations and call on them to uphold international humanitarian and human rights law, ensuring protection of civilians and refraining from any actions, including the use of heavy firepower, which has devastating effects on densely populated areas, including displacement camps. Mr. President, we unequivocally condemn the attacks and threats against MONUSCO and their personnel, as well as SEMI-DRC, in the strongest possible terms. We mourn the tragic loss of those who have made the ultimate sacrifice and extend our condolences to their families. We stand in solidarity with the wounded, wishing them a swift recovery. These acts are not just an affront to those who serve in MONUSCO and may amount to war crimes, but they are also an assault to the very values of the international community and an attack on peace itself. They call for justice and accountability. We extend our gratitude to all troops and police contributing countries for their sacrifice and contribution to the UN efforts in the DRC. We stand with them in these difficult times. Mr. President, a little over a month ago, all 15 members of this Council raised their hands in unison to renew MONUSCO's mandate. That vote was not only symbolic. It was a commitment to the women and men peacekeepers in uniform and beyond, whose foremost duty is the protection of civilians in Eastern DRC and supporting peace efforts in the Eastern DRC. They have put their own lives at risk on a daily basis. Today, these very women and men, alongside millions of innocent civilians, face mortal threats. We mourn the tragic loss of those who have made the ultimate sacrifice, and we stand with others in solidarity. Colleagues, the international community and this Council cannot afford to remain passive in the face of the crisis. We have clearly heard calls from the field to the Council to send a clear message. It is our responsibility to stand unequivocally behind them. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Slovenia for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. Let me start by thanking all the briefers today, and in particular, to extend my thanks to SOSG Keita for her steadfast leadership. I welcome the participation of DRC Foreign Minister Wagner at our meeting, as well as the representatives of Rwanda, Angola, Uruguay, and South Africa. President, MONUSCO peacekeepers and personnel work bravely to deliver this Council's mandate in the most difficult of circumstances. The United Kingdom reiterates clearly today that attacks on UN peacekeepers are absolutely unacceptable and may constitute war crimes. We also recall that planning, directing, sponsoring, or conducting attacks against MONUSCO peacekeepers may constitute a basis for UN sanctions designations. The UK extends its sympathies to the families of the Blue Helmets from South Africa and Uruguay who've lost their lives serving in MONUSCO. And we extend our best wishes for a full recovery to those peacekeepers who've been injured. The UK also extends its condolences to the families of all troops from the Southern African Development Community mission in DRC who've lost their lives in support of DRC's stability and security. As we do so, we fully acknowledge the numbers of those lost and injured is changing by the hour. It is a critical moment for DRC and for the region. President, I would now like to make 3 points. First, the UK once again condemns the violent actions of all armed groups, including FDLR and M23. We are deeply concerned by the scale and pace of recent M23 and Rwandan Defence Forces advances in eastern DRC. In December, this Council renewed MONUSCO's mandate. And in the 4 weeks since, M23's unacceptable offensive and that of the Rwandan Defence Forces through North and South Kivu has resulted in the capture of several towns and villages. As we've heard, hundreds of thousands of civilians have been displaced, and violence has intensified as a result. We are also deeply alarmed by M23's declaration that they intend to take Goma, a city where the humanitarian situation is already catastrophic. The rising number of displaced people resulting from M23's territorial expansion has placed further pressure on crowded IDP camps and exacerbates the challenges faced by humanitarian actors. This morning, the UK Foreign Secretary spoke with President Kagame and called for urgent de-escalation, outlining the need for Rwanda and DRC to urgently return to the negotiating table. Now more than ever, it is critical that MONUSCO is able to deliver its mandate. M23 attacks on peacekeepers, with support from the RDF, must stop immediately. These attacks prevent the force from being able to discharge its Security Council mandated mission to protect civilians. Rwandan spoofing and jamming of GPS signals, which obstruct UN and humanitarian operations, must also stop. We urge all parties to remember their obligations under international humanitarian law. Finally, President, the United Kingdom once again extends its thanks to Angola for its leadership on mediation efforts. We encourage DRC and Rwanda to return to the negotiating table and to focus on making tangible progress on delivering on their commitments under the concept of operations. There can be no military solution. Fighting must stop, civilians must be protected, and the parties should engage in good faith in the political process. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. SRG Keita, thank you for your briefing today. MONUSCO is facing immense pressure. Denmark greatly appreciates your continued leadership and engagement. Let me also thank ASG Msuya, and through her, the entire humanitarian community in the DRC, and USG Lacroix and the Department of Peace Operations for their tireless work in support of our peacekeepers. And I welcome the presence of Her Excellency Foreign Minister Wagner in today's meeting. Let me first express Denmark's deepest condolences to the families, friends and comrades of the brave peacekeepers who have paid the ultimate sacrifice in the service of peace. Mr. President, as we speak, the M23, with the support of Rwandan Defence Forces, are advancing towards Goma. Denmark condemns, in the strongest terms, the M23's offensive in Goma and its recent captures of Minova and Sake. The human suffering this has caused and will cause is unconscionable. Let there be no doubt. This offensive, as well as Rwanda's military presence in the DRC, are clear violations of the terms agreed in the ceasefire, clear violations of the UN Charter, and clear violations of the territorial integrity of the DRC. We call on the M23 and RDF to cease the operations and withdraw from all occupied areas immediately. Mr. President, MONUSCO is operating under extremely difficult circumstances. It faces a hostile opposition that uses GPS interference and increasingly complex weaponry. This not only severely restricts the mission's operations, but also delays humanitarian aid delivery and complicates access to the most vulnerable civilian populations. Let me be very clear. Denmark deplores, in the strongest terms, any attacks against blue helmets, UN staff, and their humanitarian partners. Such attacks are unacceptable and a violation of international law and may constitute war crimes. Mr. President, Eastern DRC has long contended with a multitude of crises. The humanitarian situation is catastrophic. With M23's advance from its surrounding areas, civilians sought protection in overburdened and overcrowded IDP camps in Goma. Widespread sexual and gender-based violence, child recruitments, hate speech and xenophobia, summary killings and other persistent violations of international humanitarian law, as well as violations and abuse of human rights, have been reported and extensively documented. We express our deep concern for the protection of civilians. We call on all parties to immediately comply with international humanitarian law and international human rights law. All responsible parties must be held to account, and the protection of civilians, including human rights defenders, journalists, and civil society, must be ensured. There is an urgent need to guarantee the security of all medical workers and humanitarian personnel, including in IDP camps. Humanitarian access and corridors must be ensured. That goes both for those fleeing and for those staying. Mr. President, the DRC has faced instability and conflict for more than 3 decades. We are now at the brink of a more widespread conflict, with unspeakable devastation, not just for the Congolese people, but for the whole region. We urge all parties to act and engage in good faith, and to immediately recommit to the existing, robust processes in place to resolve the conflict. We echo the statements made by the Secretary General and urge the DRC and Rwanda to remain fully engaged in the Luanda process. Momentum must be maintained on the neutralization of the FDLR and withdrawal of Rwandan forces, as well as the swift application of the reinforced ad hoc verification mechanism. We urge Rwanda to send its representative to the mechanism immediately. Denmark expresses its full support to both the Luanda process and the Nairobi process. We strongly urge Rwanda to immediately cease its support to the M23 and withdraw its forces, and for the DRC to immediately cease its support to the FDLR, both of which have been consistently documented by the group of experts on the DRC. Illegal exploitation of national resources in the eastern DRC is a key driver to instability in Great Lakes region. This must end. We encourage Rwanda and DRC to investigate and prosecute all actors and networks involved. Mr. President, to conclude, as we speak, the Congolese people are suffering that long predates this meeting, this current offensive, and which has deep historical ties. They are looking to this Council to act. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of China.
Thank you, President. I thank SRSG Keita, USG Lacroix, ASG Msuya for their briefings. In recent days, tensions have escalated dramatically in Eastern DRC, with M23 launching offensives in North Kivu, capturing key towns such as Masisi, Minowa, and Sake, resulting in heavy civilian casualties and displacements. It is shocking that M23 firing at MONUSCO positions, resulting in the death of 3 UN peacekeepers and the injury of many others, as well as serious casualties among Sami DRC troops. China condemns the M23 attacks against local civilians and peacekeepers. We express our condolences to the peacekeepers who lost their lives and sympathy to the injured. Considering the current situation in Eastern DRC, I would like to emphasize the following points. First, China strongly urges M23 to cease attacks immediately. At present, the M23 continues to launch attacks and openly claims that it wants to take Goma, which is a matter of grave concern to China. The possibility of further escalation of the fighting is deeply disconcerting. The relevant actions of M23 constitute a serious violation of the ceasefire agreement and jeopardize regional peace and stability. China calls on M23 to abide by the ceasefire agreement, stop resorting to force, withdraw from from the territories it has taken and return to the track of political settlement. All external forces should refrain from providing military support to the M23 and other armed groups to prevent further deterioration of the situation. Second, the protection of civilians should be the top priority. International humanitarian law is the bottom line that must be respected, no matter what the demands and objectives of the M23 armed attacks are. It should not come at the cost of civilian lives, and it should not attack civilians and civilian facilities. At present, a large number of civilians have fled their homes seeking refuge, and a severe shortage of humanitarian supplies. The international community should provide timely humanitarian assistance. M23 should ensure that the channels of humanitarian assistance are open and unimpeded. Third, MONUSCO should be supported in performing its duties in accordance with its mandate. MONUSCO is at the forefront of the conflict and is carrying out its peacekeeping mandate in line with the Council resolutions. M23 should not threaten the safety and security of peacekeepers. Attacks on peacekeepers may constitute war crimes. China supports MONUSCO in strengthening its defensive measures in Sake and Goma and opposes acts such as jamming GPS signals that impede MONUSCO's mandate delivery. We also call on all parties to refrain from spreading misinformation and disinformation against MONUSCO and peacekeepers. Fourth, we must firmly support regional mediation efforts. Under the current circumstances, it is even more urgent to scale up mediation efforts. Although the tripartite summit has been postponed, the Rwanda process remains an effective platform for resolving the issues of Eastern DRC. China expects the DRC and Rwanda to stay committed to the track of political dialogue and strengthen communication and find a lasting peace program. China supports Angola and the other parties concerned in continuing to intensify their diplomatic efforts to ease the situation. It is our hope that SRSG on DRC, Ms. Keita, and the Special Envoy of the SG for the Great Lakes region, Ms. Xia Huang, will strengthen coordination and provide greater support for the Rwanda and Nairobi processes. President, China reiterates its firm support for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the DRC and support for the efforts of the DRC government in safeguarding national security. We support the Council speak with one voice as soon as possible and create enabling conditions to promote the de-escalation of the crisis in Eastern DRC and maintain regional stability. I thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
I thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the Pakistan delegation thanks you for convening this urgent meeting of the Security Council. We thank Under Secretary General Lacroix, SRSG Bintou Keita, and ASG Msuya for their briefings describing the very disturbing situation in Eastern DRC. We welcome the participation of the Foreign Minister of the DRC at this meeting, as well as the representatives of Rwanda, Angola, and other countries. I would like to make the following points. First, Pakistan supports the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the DRC in accordance with the principles of the UN Charter. We deplore any foreign intervention in its internal affairs. We call for the withdrawal of Rwandan forces from the territory of the DRC. Second, we strongly condemn the attacks in North and now South Kivu by the M23. The M23 has captured Sake and encircled Goma, causing sizable civilian casualties, as well as attacking United Nations and African peacekeepers, several of whom have been killed or injured. These attacks on civilians and on UN peacekeepers deployed under the mandate of the Security Council constitute war crimes, and those responsible for perpetrating, supporting, or sponsoring these attacks must be held accountable. We demand that the M23 halt its attacks immediately, withdraw from the areas it has occupied, and observe the ceasefire agreement of 31st July 2024, as well as to end its GPS jamming and spoofing. We express our condolences to South Africa, Uruguay, and to the families of the peacekeepers who have lost their lives in the noble cause of preserving peace and security. Third, we urge that adequate and urgent response be made to the humanitarian crisis that is being faced in eastern DRC. Assistance must reach all those affected by the M23 offensive, and access must be ensured by all parties, including the M23, to the civilian and others in need of such assistance. Fourth, we admire the bravery of our peacekeepers. At the same time, we urge MONUSCO and the United Nations to take immediate measures to ensure the safety and security of not only civilians, but also the United Nations and other peacekeeping units which are in eastern DRC. We are particularly concerned for the Pakistani artillery battery located in Sake and in adjacent areas. It is highly exposed and without supporting forces to defend itself against the M23 forces. This unit should be quickly redeployed for the safety of its personnel and of its heavy and expensive equipment, which must not fall into the hands of the rebel force. Redeployment will also enable the unit to provide support to the DRC forces more effectively. Such redeployment needs to be done immediately and while it is still possible. Fifth, the UN, MONUSCO, and DRC forces must develop an effective military strategy to counter the M23, which outnumbers the DRC and the peacekeepers and has more advanced capabilities. We must ensure respect for MONUSCO and its forces, not only in the region, but within the DRC itself. Pakistan feels that the withdrawal from South Kivu, which saw the withdrawal of Pakistani blue helmets from there, was hasty and influenced by political considerations. I must recall that our troops had succeeded in maintaining peace and order in South Kivu. We need to strengthen MONUSCO and equip it with the capabilities to respond to the challenges which it is facing in eastern DRC. Without adequate reinforcements, equipment, and political support, especially from within DRC, the UN and other peacekeepers cannot be expected to implement their challenging mandate assigned to them by the Council. Sixth, we call on the DRC and Rwanda to resume the dialogue under the Luanda process, ably led by His Excellency President Lorenzo of Angola. This process has made encouraging progress. We regret that the 15 December summit did not take place. It should be urgently reconvened. The understandings reached under the Luanda process, the neutralization of the FDLR and the withdrawal of Rwandan forces from DRC should be maintained and implemented even as the challenge posed by the M23 is confronted and ended. We also hope that reconciliation within DRC will be achieved through the Nairobi process under the able leadership of former President Kenyatta of Kenya. We extend our full support to the Special Envoy for the Great Lakes region in promoting dialogue to resolve the conflict in eastern DRC. Finally, Mr. President, we urge that the Security Council address the root cause of the conflict in eastern DRC, that is, the illegal exploitation of its natural resources. This requires greater oversight and traceability mechanisms, working in coordination with the DRC government and regional and international partners, and encouraged and supported by the Security Council. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, we are grateful to Jean-Pierre Lacroix and Bintou Keita and Joyce Msuya for their briefings. We welcome the participation in this meeting of the Foreign Minister of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Teresa Wagner, and the representatives of the Rwanda, Angola, South Africa, and Uruguay. Mr. President, we're extremely dismayed by the current escalation by the M23, and we condemn it. Because of its actions, the civilian population is the one that is suffering. First and foremost, we express our condolences to the families of all the citizens of the DRC who have died. We're forced to witness another wave of IDPs. Their number, according to the latest UN figures, has exceeded 400,000. Many of these people were already internally displaced persons and were living in refugee camps in the harshest conditions. And we're particularly concerned about the use in the area of direct conflict of advanced weapon systems, the use of heavy artillery close to civilian infrastructure. And we're also troubled by the continued use of electronic warfare means, which creates a threat inter alia for civilian aviation. Unfortunately, the UN mission to stabilize the DRC has also taken casualties. We express our condolences to the families of the peacekeepers that have died from South Africa and Uruguay, as well as the governments of these countries. We hope for the speediest recovery of the wounded from other contingents. Russia has unconditionally condemns attacks against blue helmets. As a result of one of such attacks in March of 2022, one of our nationals, a senior member of the Russian military observers group, Alexei Mizuro, died. We express our support and gratitude to the UN mission to stabilize the DRC and its leadership and peacekeepers. We also express our deepest condolences to the families of the fighters of the Southern Africa Development Community in Malawi who were killed. Russia expresses solidarity with the governments of these countries and the contingents of this SADC. We hope for their quickest recovery. The current escalation after the breakdown of the Rwanda summit at the end of last year is clear evidence of the price that has to be paid when political instruments do not function. We call for an immediate cessation of military activities and return of Rwanda and the DRC to the negotiating table with Angolan mediation, as well as the confirmation by the parties of their commitment to the mutual obligations in the framework of the Rwanda process. At the same time, we'd like to underscore that real progress on the diplomatic track will only be possible after the end of relations of states with illegal armed groups. This applies first and foremost to M23 and the Force Démocratique for the Liberation of Rwanda, FDLR. Whether the parameters of this process will be determined in the framework of relaunching of the Nairobi process or the result of other initiatives. That should be decided by Rwanda and the DRC. However, it is clear that this issue requires a comprehensive approach and certain flexibility by both sides. Without tackling it, it will not be possible to find a sustainable and viable formula for political resolution of the conflict, and this must be done immediately to avoid the worst. Mr. President, we should not forget that the central element of this crisis is the illegal exploitation of the Congolese natural resources. It's no secret for anyone that currently in the region rich in coltan or rubaya, which is under the control of M23. Everyone also knows that other groups and external players are involved in this criminal business. We all know who they are. And they are enriching themselves by smuggling blood natural resources from the eastern part of the DRC. We are convinced that the struggle to gain access towards strategically important Congolese minerals is one of the reasons for the continuation of the crisis we're witnessing. Once again, we call on countries with political and economic influence in the region to use it and to work with the main protagonists. This could contribute to a rapid end of the escalation, which was demonstrated very well by the situation that we witnessed in 2012 and 2013. At the same time, together with other members of the Security Council, we will continue working on coordinating the appropriate reaction to these events, which are taking place in the east of the DRC. We hope that we will be able to find the right language that will contribute to ending the suffering of the civilian population and a return to negotiations. In conclusion, I'd like to say that we should not forget about the fact that the instability in the Great Lakes region is to a large extent a legacy of the colonial period. It was precisely then that the metropoles of the time laid the ticking time bombs that the region continues to suffer from. We see how the Congolese are tired of violence and how much they just want to live and work on their own land. Russia, as a permanent member of the Security Council, will do everything possible to bring this long-for moment closer. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation. I now give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Señor Presidente.
Mr. President, my delegation would like to thank the presidency of this council for making the relevant arrangements to convene this emergency meeting to address the alarming situation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. We'd also like to welcome the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. We recognize and we value the briefing by the Special Representative of the Secretary General to the DRC and the head of MONUSCO, Ms. Bintou Keita, whose leadership is crucial at this critical juncture. We also convey our solidarity in light of the news that has been conveyed today, which is unacceptable to the Republic of Panama. We also extend our thanks to USG Jean-Pierre Lacroix and ASG Joyce Msuya. We thank them for their valuable contributions in this complex scenario, which has had a direct effect on tens and hundreds of thousands of displaced persons. Panama expresses its deep concern at the escalating conflict in the east of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, marked by the recent advances of the March 23 movement rebel group in North Kivu, which has further worsened the already precarious humanitarian and security situation. The recent 23rd of January offensive has worsened the mass displacement of civilians towards Goma and has caused irreparable harm, including the tragic death of the military governor of North Kivu, Major General Peter Sirimwani. The M23's advances, as well as the consolidation of local de facto administrations, not only pose a serious threat to the stability of the region, but also directly threaten international efforts in mediation and peacemaking, such as those under the Luanda and Nairobi processes. We condemn in the strongest terms the actions of the M23 and of all those which directly or indirectly are fueling this crisis. It's urgent for all actors to act responsibly and immediately end any form of support for the armed groups. Failing this, the suffering of the Congolese people will worsen yet further. President, these events are also jeopardizing the lives of UN personnel and stymieing their ability to effectively implement their mandate. Against this backdrop, it is essential for this Council to enhance its support for MONUSCO, guaranteeing the necessary resources and support to enable it to respond to the current challenges and to protect the most vulnerable populations. We reject and we roundly condemn the attacks perpetrated on United Nations staff. Furthermore, we deeply regret the tragic loss of lives of blue helmets in the recent clashes during operations in the North Kivu province in the DRC. We express our most heartfelt solidarity and condolences to the governments and peoples of South Africa, Malawi, and Uruguay following these irreparable human losses. We also align ourselves and support the families at this difficult time. We honor the bravery and the sacrifice of those who, with exemplary commitment, dedicated their efforts to the noble mission of preserving international peace and security. We recognize and we thank those countries that have contributed troops to the United Nations Stabilization Mission in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, thus contributing to the mandate of protecting civilians and promoting stability in the country. Distinguished colleagues, Mr. President, we strongly appeal to all involved parties to fully respect the ceasefire, to bring an immediate end to hostilities, and to honor the commitments made under the Luanda and Nairobi processes. Furthermore, we reiterate the urgent need to resume negotiations under the Nairobi process, recognizing that inclusive dialogue involving all relevant stakeholders is essential to reach a lasting political solution. President, to conclude, Panama reaffirms its firm and unwavering commitment to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. We believe that a comprehensive and coordinated approach combining the leadership of regional mechanisms with the resolute support of this Council is essential to bring an end to the violence and to ease the suffering of the Congolese people. President, time is running out. We cannot allow the promises of peace to fade into inaction. Today, more than ever, it is imperative for the international community to step up its efforts to strengthen MONUSCO's operational capacity. History will not judge us on our intentions, but rather our actions. Only with steadfast commitment and concrete action will we be able to pave the way towards sustainable peace. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Panama for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President, for convening this urgent meeting. I thank SRSG Keita, the USG Lacroix, ASG Msuya for their timely briefings. I also welcome Foreign Minister Wagner of the DRC, as well as the representatives of Rwanda, Angola, Uruguay, South Africa, and Burundi to this meeting. At the outset, the Republic of Korea expresses its deepest condolences and sympathies to the bereaved families and nations of all peacekeepers who have sacrificed their lives in fulfilling their mandate. We also wish a speedy and full recovery to all those injured. I'd like to underscore 4 points today concerning the devastating developments on the ground. First, we condemn in the strongest possible terms the ongoing offensive by the M23 in North Kivu and demand the M23 to immediately cease its unjustifiable attacks. The M23's attempts to capture Goma, a city of around 2 million people, through advances along 3 different axes, have intensified civilian suffering. In the past week alone, as the group has expanded its territory by 11%, the number of IDPs has doubled to 400,000. These actions clearly violate the ceasefire established under the Rwanda process, inevitably provoking retaliatory measures by the FARDC. The M23's establishment of parallel administrations in DRC territory also constitute egregious violations of the DRC's sovereignty and territorial integrity. These actions must cease immediately. Second, Rwanda must stop all forms of support to the M23, and unauthorized foreign military forces must withdraw from the DRC without delay. Otherwise, consequences will only lead to further violence and instability, not only in eastern DRC, but also in the larger Great Lakes region. Furthermore, the involvement of Burundian and other forces, coupled with the opening of new battlefronts in South Kivu, where MONUSCO has already withdrawn, significantly heightens the risk of this rapidly expanding crisis escalating into a full-scale regional conflict. Third, the safety and security of peacekeepers must be upheld as a requisite priority in carrying out their mandates. In this light, we strongly condemn the attacks against the positions and bases of MONUSCO and the Sami DRC, which have already resulted in numerous casualties. The use of GPS jamming and spoofing, along with the deployment of surface-to-air missiles, is particularly alarming. Credible reports implicating Rwanda in these hostile acts are profoundly troubling. These actions gravely undermine the safety and security of UN peacekeepers and significantly hinder MONUSCO's ability to fulfill its key mandate of protecting civilians. We take this opportunity to reiterate that attacks against peacekeepers may constitute war crimes, and the involvement in such acts warrant sanctions designations in accordance with Security Council resolutions. Fourth, we call on the DRC and Rwanda to return to dialogue and fully implement their commitments under the Rwanda process. The postponement of the tripartite summit planned for December was disappointing, but it must not undermine the progress achieved thus far. We recognize the differing interests of the DRC and Rwanda, but further escalation of tensions is simply unacceptable. Many lives are at stake. We reaffirm our unwavering support for President Lourenço of Angola and his important mediation efforts. All commitments under the Rwanda process must be upheld, including the neutralization of the FDLR and the disengagement of forces. The operationalization of the reinforced ad hoc verification mechanism is essential to ensure strict compliance with the ceasefire. In conclusion, Mr. President, as we stand on the precipice of even greater violence and instability in eastern DRC, my delegation reiterates our urgent appeal for de-escalation and for all parties to step back from the brink. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the Republic of Korea for his statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Therese Kayikwamba Wagner, State Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Cooperation and Francophonie of the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, distinguished members of the Council, allow me, on behalf of the government and people of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, to express our gratitude for convening this meeting on such short notice. We hail the involvement of the Algerian presidency, and we acknowledge the contribution of the United States during the previous presidency. We also express our gratitude to the Secretary General of the UN, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, and applaud the invaluable contributions of Madame Bintou Keita, Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix, and Madame Joyce Msuya in efforts to support peace and security in our country. Before continuing my intervention, I would like to observe a moment of silence to pay tribute to the ultimate sacrifice made over the past 72 hours by the soldiers of peace of MONUSCO and of the Southern African Development Community, SADC, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. I also honor the courage of the armed forces of the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the memory of the Congolese civilian population massacred by Rwanda.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President, members of the Council, history is calling us today in this chamber where the destiny of nations is decided. History tolerates neither indifference or hesitation. What the DRC is going through is not a conflict is like others. It is a deliberate and methodical aggression against the sovereign state, a flagrant violation of the founding principles of this organization, and an intolerable attack against international peace and security. The Democratic Republic of the Congo legitimately expects from this Council to act firmly and promptly to safeguard international peace and security and to uphold international law. This is a power that is exclusively granted to the Council by the UN Charter. Mr. President, at this very moment, as I'm speaking before you, an attack of unprecedented intensity is taking place in plain sight of the world. Additional Rwandan troops have crossed the boundary markers 12 and 13 of the border crossing between Goma and Gisenyi, penetrating to our territory in broad daylight, in open and deliberate violation of our national sovereignty. It's a frontal aggression, a declaration of war, which no longer hides itself behind diplomatic maneuvers. In Goma, the armed forces of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, supported by the troops of the United Nations and the SADC, are defending the city and its population on several fronts with courage and determination that only a just and noble cause to defend one's legitimate right to exist can inspire. But this combat is not limited to the field of battle. Over 3 million civilians as well as humanitarian workers have been taken hostage by the aggressors, used as human shields in a cynical strategy of terror and chaos. The signs are unmistakable. Rwanda is preparing to orchestrate a carnage in broad daylight with a brutality that recalls the darkest pages of our history. It is imperative that these combats cease immediately. Each hour that passes brings our region closer to a tragedy of an unimaginable scale. We refuse to see a repetition of a nightmare of 1996, this dark page in African history that we had thought had turned. Today, the victims are not only Congolese. This attack is aimed at Africa as a whole. I would even say against humanity as a whole. Rwandan bullets indistinctly hit South Africans, Tanzanians, Malawis, Burundian citizens, all African brothers and sisters that have come for peace. And what about you, members of the Council? This aggression is not only aimed against the Democratic Republic of the Congo, it is aimed at you, your mission, against your soldiers of peace that you have mandated to protect and not to be targeted. Let me be absolutely clear. Each minute that passes without decisive action by this Council is a victory for the aggressor. Each hesitation undermines the credibility of the United Nations and condemns innocence to an unspeakable fate. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, the world is watching you. It's time to act. Since the 6th of January of 2025, the Defense Forces of Rwanda, RDF, and their auxiliaries from the M23 have stepped up their attacks in flagrant violation of the ceasefire of the 4th of August 2024, occupying strategic towns such as Katale, Lushebere, and Masisi Center before continuing on to Bweremana, Minova, and Kalunga. These attacks aggravate an already disastrous humanitarian situation, provoking the displacement of millions of Congolese aiming to drive them out from their homes and establishing a parallel administration and modify the configuration of the region. In Goma, the RDF have deliberately cut lines of supply for electricity and water. They have blocked strategic roads and used GPS jamming, endangering civilian and humanitarian flights. On the 19th of January of this year, the hospital of the Doctors Without Borders in Masisi Center was hit by a rocket, wounding 2 humanitarian workers. These actions, as well as the continued attacks against IDP camps, illustrate a clear violation by Rwanda of international humanitarian law and reveal the goal of DFR and the M23, which is to sow terror and paralyze humanitarian assistance. We would warn against falling into the trap of the fallacious pretext put forward by the government of Rwanda, which has invoked the protection of one of our numerous minorities as justification for its interference. The reality is very different. Today, in the Congolese IDP camps, the victims are of all ethnic groups, including the Congolese Tutsis that are suffering the same tragic fate that their fellow citizens in the face of the violence of the Rwandan armed forces M23. So as we face this humanitarian disaster, it's clear that this crisis is directly linked to the economic plunder of the east of our country. The last report of the group of experts reveals the scale of the economic plunder by Rwanda in the east of the DRC. Each month, over 150 tons of coltan are illegally extracted and transported to Rwanda, where they're fraudulously labeled for export. This illicit commerce compromises the sovereignty of our country and finances military activities of the DFR and M23. In Rubaya, the largest site of mining of coltan in the region, the RDF and the M23 have established a parallel administration, exploiting our resources and imposing their control on local populations with complete impunity. These activities must be punished. However, this illegal exploitation is only one aspect of the aggression carried out by Rwanda. Since the start of their campaign of terror in 2022, the RDF and the M23 have systematically targeted peacekeeping forces. The 24th of January of this year, Major General Peter Kirimwami Nkuba, military governor of North Kivu, was assassinated by Rwandan forces as he commanded on the front lines. On the 25th of January of this year, 9 South African soldiers, 3 soldiers of Malawi, and a Uruguayan soldier were killed in clashes with Rwanda and M23. A tank of the United Nations was set on fire, crossing a new threshold in hostility, open hostility towards multilateral institutions. Furthermore, a company of Tanzanian blue helmets in Kanyabayonga remains surrounded and cut from all supplies by the RDF and the M23. The last report of the group of experts also reveals the use by the RDF and their auxiliaries of a sophisticated arsenal, ground-to-air missiles, GPS-guided mortars, and anti-tank missiles. These flagrant violations of the arms embargo regime and international humanitarian law are a grave threat to international peace and security of the Great Lakes region. These 3 dimensions, humanitarian, economic, and security, reveal an indisputable reality. We're seeing a systematic and coordinated aggression against the Democratic Republic of the Congo by Rwanda. Mr. President, distinguished members of the Council, the Luanda process, designed to offer a framework for a peaceful resolution, has been sabotaged by the intransigence of Rwanda. Each commitment undertaken in Luanda has been trampled on, starting with the ceasefire of the 4th of August. Also, since the establishment of the reinforced ad hoc verification mechanism in Goma on the 5th of November of 2023, Rwanda has never sent its 3 military experts to supervise the implementation of the ceasefire. You might recall that during our last meeting, on the 8th of December in this room, the permanent representative of Rwanda claimed that the experts were on their way to Goma. Today, 82 days later, they have still not arrived there. On the 15th of December, Rwanda intentionally sabotaged the summit convened by the facilitator of the Luanda process, His Excellency João Lorenzo, by ignoring his invitation. On the 23rd of January, Rwanda surprised the entire world by requesting the mediation of Turkey, stepping away from the principles of African solutions to African problems. In spite of this flagrant contempt demonstrated by Rwanda for the Luanda process, the Democratic Republic of the Congo is fully committed and reiterates its trust in His Excellency João Lourenço. This process, endorsed by the African Union, is the only legitimate framework for a political solution to the conflict between the DRC and Rwanda. This framework, exclusively between states, cannot include non-state actors or elevate them to the same status as sovereign states. The Democratic Republic of the Congo will reject any attempt to include M23 in the Luanda process, directing it rather towards this legitimate framework, that is the Nairobi process under the facilitation of His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta. The DRC reiterates its full confidence in him and rejects any attempt to dilute his efforts at mediation. Mr. President, distinguished members of the Council, in spite of the repeated warnings of the government of the DRC for the past 3 years, this Council has remained inactive. This Council cannot content itself with declarations of concern or simply to remain seized of the matter. Its mandate, its duty is to protect international peace and security, to defend human life without distinction for origin, race, religion, or gender. This Council is a guarantor of the hope and faith in better days, in days of peace, development, and prosperity. This is why we call this Council to act decisively and immediately in conformity with the overwhelming proof provided in the latest report of the group of experts. Here are the concrete actions that we demand of the Council. The Security Council must order immediately the end of hostilities by Rwanda and demand an immediate withdrawal of Rwandan troops present on Congolese territory. This Security Council must impose targeted sanctions, including asset freeze and travel ban, not only against identified members of the chain of command of the RDF, but also against the political decision makers responsible for this aggression. The Security Council must impose a complete embargo on the export of all labeled minerals, or all minerals labeled as Rwanda, and in particular coltan and gold, in order to put an end to the illegal exploitation of natural resources of the DRC and financing of armed conflict. The Council must revoke immediately the status of Rwanda as a troop-contributing country to peacekeeping operations. The coordinated actions of the RDF and the M23 are grave violation of international law and compromise the integrity of peacekeeping operations. The Security Council, lastly, must establish a regime of systematic violation for all sale or transfer of weapons to Rwanda by member states or private entities. This will guarantee that these weapons are not used to equip armed groups under embargo, such as the M23. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, this Council is at a major turning point. Indecision and inaction can no longer be tolerated in the face of a crisis that threatens to plunge our country and the region into absolute chaos. Each day of delay spurs the aggressor and weakens the principles that found this organization. We call this Council to fully use the full range of measures envisioned under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter to preserve peace and protect the sovereignty of the DRC. The Congolese people are moved by a profound aspiration, the aspiration of living in security, to building a prosperous future and actively contribute together with other nations of the world to an international order based on the respect for law and principles of justice. This aspiration will not be stifled. We exhort you to write a new page of courage and commitment, a page where the values of multilateralism and solidarity prevail over indifference and calculation. History will remember your decisions today, as it will remember our tireless fight for peace, dignity, and sovereignty. And to those who would dare to justify what cannot be justified, we will say this: there is no place in these chambers dedicated to global peace for rhetoric that seeks to justify the inexcusable sin of sacrificing innocent lives. The respect that for the thousands, hundreds of thousands of lives at stake demands silence in the face of the evidence. The Congolese people have demonstrated resilience and dignity and determination that demand respect. This exemplary courage, fueled by the desire to live in security, to build a prosperous future, and to contribute to an just international order, is a sign of the greatness of the Congo. This unbreakable spirit will never be crushed. Thank you.
I thank Her Excellency Ms. Kaikwamba Wagner for her statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Rwanda.
Mr. President, thank you for giving the floor. Allow me to begin by thanking the Algerian presidency for its able leadership at the helm of the Security Council for this month of January. We also thank Algeria for convening this important meeting. I recognize the presence and the briefing given before by SRSG Bintou Keita and USG Lacroix and ASG Joyce Msuya. I also recognize the presence of the Foreign Minister of DRC and the participation of Angola, Uruguay, South Africa, and Burundi. Mr. President, Rwanda regrets the deteriorating security situation in the eastern region of the Democratic Republic of Congo. The current crisis could have been averted had the DRC government demonstrated a genuine commitment to peace. The DRC has all the necessary tools to achieve a lasting resolution to the ongoing conflict. The international community placed high expectations on the Luanda and Nairobi peace processes, designed on one hand to restore a good relationship between Rwanda and the DRC, and on the other to promote inter-Congolese dialogue by addressing the root causes of the conflict. These include persistent governance failures in the DRC, as well as the presence of over 250 domestic armed groups, including the M23, and 14 foreign armed groups, including the genocidal FDR and many others. Mr. President, the Rwanda process, which was revitalized in March 2024, achieved significant milestones. On 31st July 2024, the three ministers agreed on a ceasefire between warring parties in Rwanda, which came into force on 4th August 2024. This ceasefire was more or less holding, despite occasional skirmishes, until the month of October 2024. Council members, since October 2024, the DRC government and its armed forces, the FARDC, decided to increase the militarization of the eastern DRC by deploying heavy weaponry, including attack drones, and deployed additional troops along our border, including 10,000 Burundian troops. As a consequence and in violation of the ceasefire, the FARDC decided to intensify its military operation by attacking the positions of the M23, which retaliated and took more territories. Unfortunately, we regret that the international community chose to condemn the M23 for extending its territories without condemning FARDC military coalition for violating the ceasefire. The ceasefire was between all the warring parties, so all warring parties should have observed it. To make matters worse, the Congolese army is placing heavy weapons and artillery in heavily populated areas, including in close proximity to IDP camps, against warnings by international humanitarian organizations, such as the International Committee of the Red Cross and Médecins Sans Frontières. Such actions have led to unfortunate loss of innocent lives. In turn, this heavy artillery was used to bomb and indiscriminately shell territories under M23 control. Most of the bombings targeted densely populated areas, leading to loss of lives, livelihoods, and homes. After the postponement of the 15th of December 2024 Luanda summit, the situation aggravated on the ground due to the DRC's obsession with a military solution to this conflict. By prioritizing militarization of the conflict instead of embracing the regional mechanisms that have been put in place to foster a sustainable solution born out of dialogue, the conflict has continued to escalate, leading to the prevailing situation today. Mr. President, Council members, under the Rwanda process, a ministerial-level agreement was reached on a concept of operations, CONOPS, to neutralize the FDLR, a UN and UN-sanctioned genocidal militia, and to lift Rwanda's defensive measures along the common border. The FDLR, which poses a direct threat to Rwanda's security and territorial integrity, is composed of remnants of the perpetrators of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi that claimed over 1 million lives. For decades, the FDLR has found sanctuary in the DRC, where it recruits fighters, influences corrupt local elites, and spreads its anti-Tutsi genocide ideology in Congolese communities. This has led to ethnic cleansing and persecution of those local communities, with the result of hundreds of thousands of them now scattered as refugees in the region, and others in IDP camps. Today, the FDLR has even moved from being a speculative force to a strategic ally of the Kinshasa government. Council members, the draft agreement under the Rwanda process that was supposed to be agreed on and signed during the summit of 15th December 2024 had 3 security concerns clearly identified, including by the mediator. The 3 clearly identified security concerns were the question of the FDLR, Rwanda's defense measures, and the question of the M23. The CONOPS that was agreed on by the 3 ministers on 25th November 2024 addresses the first 2 elements by putting in place a timeline for the neutralization of the FDLR and lifting of Rwanda's defensive measures. Only the question of the M23 was yet to be resolved. While the 2 countries were involved in discussions in Rwanda on a plan to neutralize the FDLR, the situation on the ground was different. Since the first ministerial meeting of 21st of March, during which the then DRC had accepted to provide a plan to neutralize the FDLR, the coalition between the FDLR and the government of Kinshasa had increased. As we speak, it has never been more intense at any other time in recent history. As I said today, FDLR has become an ally of the DRC army. Even on 25th November 2024, when the 3 ministers were busy in Rwanda signing the CONOPS, there were 3 high-level meetings between FARDC and FDLR commanders that very day in Goma. This reflects the stark contrast between the good faith that the DRC wants to project to the international community and the lack of political will on the ground to end its strategic alliance with the FDLR. Despite an initial agreement by the DRC to enter into dialogue under the Nairobi process, the DRC minister categorically refused for 9 hours the inclusion of any commitment for dialogue between the DRC and the M23. Therefore, since it was the only item on the agenda, the only solution was to postpone the summit, as Rwanda is not interested by a photo opportunity. The reason the heads of state were to travel to Rwanda for the summit was for one agenda item, to sign an agreement. And since there was no agreement to sign, there was no reason for the summit except to postpone it until the issues are all agreed on. Mr. President, Council members, the recent militarization by the DRC, including the formation of a broader coalition involving the FARDC, the FDLR, Wazalendo, 10,000 Burundian forces, 1,600 European mercenaries, and SADC-led some DRC forces, represents an unprecedented security threat to Rwanda. For 2 years, DRC President Felix Tshisekedi has publicly vowed to instigate regime change in Rwanda. That's a very serious matter for us. A head of state who declares regime change on another country is a matter not to be taken lightly. This rhetoric, coupled with the coalition's significant military presence along Rwanda's border, is destabilizing and unacceptable. Rwanda also notes with disappointment the international community's failure to condemn the use of foreign mercenaries in this conflict, despite clear violation of the 1977 Organization of African Unity Convention and the 1989 UN Convention against the use of mercenaries, especially by state actors. The arrest of Romanian mercenary leader Horatiu Poltra in December 2024 underscores the gravity of this issue. Yet no strong action was undertaken, and no condemnation was issued by this Council or the European Union. Mr. President, Council members, I would like to highlight Rwanda's concerns on the role MONUSCO is currently playing in Eastern DRC. But first, I would like to be clear and to clarify that Rwanda is not hostile to MONUSCO, and no one should harm peacekeepers. However, facts are stubborn, and they speak for themselves. Rwandan concerns are threefold. One, MONUC, which later became MONUSCO, was first deployed in DRC in 1999. It is now 26 years since it was first deployed. The resolution that authorized the deployment of MONUC and all successive resolutions, including the one that turned it into MONUSCO, all gave it a clear mandate to neutralize FDLR. Unfortunately, with the presence of MONUSCO in Eastern DRC, the security situation only aggravated since then. Second, by going beyond its mandate of peacekeeping and protecting civilians, MONUSCO has now joined a broader coalition with a clearly stated goal, which is to enact regime change in Rwanda, which is another UN member state. This is because the coalition that has been put together by the DRC, including all the forces that I've named, have been clearly given clear mandate under President Tshisekedi to act towards regime change, because he's amassing this force for that purpose. We take this matter very, very seriously as well. Three, in addition, MONUSCO operations provide support to FDLR, a UN-sanctioned group, and to European mercenaries in violation of the 1989 UN Convention. This is unacceptable, and MONUSCO is at risk of being sucked into a conflict in which it would be a belligerent force. MONUSCO should focus its resources and troops to protect civilians, especially those in IDP camps, instead of fighting alongside this coalition. It is very important because it's a very clear mandate, and the mandate needs not to be changed because of the risk, especially that some of these forces, the Wazalendo groups, FDLR, have committed tremendous atrocities in Eastern DRC. So a force, an international force, to which we are all members, should not be associated with activities of such negative armed groups which have been sanctioned. Again, Rwanda supports MONUSCO and has no issue around MONUSCO except for those three issues that I have outlined. Mr. President, the situation we are facing today is no surprise to anyone. It mirrors the same situation 12 years ago. It is the result of the complete mismanagement by the DRC of a complex problem. The international community also has its fair share of the blame for being completely insensitive to the root causes of the problem and allow legitimate actors to operate completely out of their mandate. The situation we are in today prevailed exactly in 2012 and 2013. And that time, no political solution was undertaken to ensure that the issue is resolved to its root. Council members, we now stand at a critical juncture where we need to find ways to return to the diplomatic and political processes that focus on practical solutions. Rwanda is of the view that these solutions might involve additional actors, primarily based in Africa, in partnership with the international community. We are committed to the regional process, to the Rwanda process, and to a peaceful dialogue, to a peaceful resolution of this issue. And we are ready to remain engaged in a peaceful process, because we strongly believe that there is no military solution to this problem. It has to be resolved politically, diplomatically, and with the support of all partners acting together. However, in order for anything to be successful, the DRC must play a helpful role. After all, this is a Congolese problem for which the DRC is looking to outsource its solution. The solution to this problem cannot be outsourced. It requires ownership and political will, and looking at the root cause of the conflict comprehensively and addressing them. Partners can support, but partners cannot fully own and resolve this problem. Rwanda stands ready to do its part in making sure a practical solution is found that addresses the concerns of all actors involved on an equal footing. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Rwanda for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Angola.
His Excellency Ambassador Amar Benjama, President of the United Nations Security Council for the month of January, distinguished members of the Security Council, let us begin by congratulating the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria on its presidency and able stewardship of the Council, including for convening this important meeting on the prevailing situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC. We acknowledge the participation of Her Excellency Therese Kayakwamba Wagner, State Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Cooperation and Francophonie of the DRC, and His Excellency Ambassador Ernest Raimusiu, Permanent Representative of the Republic of Rwanda to the United Nations. We thank Ms. Bintou Keita, Special Representative of the Secretary General in the DRC and Head of the United Nations Organization Stabilization Mission in the DRC, Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix, and the Secretary General for Peace Operations, and Ms. Joyce Msuya, Assistant Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Deputy Emergency Relief Coordinator, for their comprehensive briefings. We would like also to express our appreciation to the members of the Security Council and all speakers for supporting His Excellency João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço, President of Angola, ongoing mediation effort through the Luanda process to achieve peace and stability in the Eastern DRC. We take this opportunity to reaffirm once again Angola's commitment to continue pursuing conflict prevention, management, and resolution initiatives in the Great Lake region. Mr. President, today we have the honor to address this Council on 3 key points. First, current situation in DRC. The increase of violence unfolding in the Eastern DRC over the past few weeks is very worrisome. On the 25th January, His Excellency João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço, President of the Republic of Angola, who was mandated by the African Union to ensure mediation in the crisis between the DRC and Rwanda, expressed deep concern with the escalation of the conflict and the serious deterioration of the peace and security situation in the Eastern DRC, particularly in the North Kivu and South Kivu provinces. The resurgence of actions and attacks perpetrated by M23 and its recent illegal occupation of Sake and Minova reflect the dangerous escalation of this conflict with enormous implications for the fragile humanitarian situation, particularly around the city of Goma, now besieged. These actions, which we vehemently condemn and repudiate, represent a flagrant and unacceptable violation of the ceasefire in force since 4th August 2024 and jeopardize all the efforts and progress made under the Luanda process towards a peaceful resolution of this conflict, which can have unforeseen consequences for regional security if not resolved now. In line with the UN Charter, the international law, and the principle of sovereign equality of all member states, the territorial integrity of DRC must be respected and upheld. The Republic of Angola calls on the parties to the conflict to respect humanitarian rights and international humanitarian law, protect civilians and safeguard the integrity and security of personnel of the reinforced ad hoc verification mechanism deployed in Goma, North Kivu, within the framework of the Angolan facilitation efforts. We reiterate our steadfast support to MONUSCO and SAMI DRC and call on all armed groups to full respect of the United Nations mandate forces. In this context, we take this opportunity to express our heartfelt condolences to the countries, namely South Africa, Malawi, and Uruguay, and the family of the deceased MONUSCO and SAMI DRC soldiers who fell in the line of duty during encounters with M23. We wish a speedy recovery to those injured. We reiterate that parties must uphold and fully respect the ceasefire agreed upon by DRC and Rwanda on the 3rd of July in Luanda, which entered into force on 4th August 2024. We strongly urge all concerned parties and stakeholders to use their good offices to reinforce and maintain the ceasefire. Second, Luanda process. We have made remarkable progress in the implementation of the Luanda process. It is important that we preserve the mediation and peace efforts undertaken by His Excellency João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço, which have contributed to the declaration of ceasefire on 4th August 2024, the adoption of the harmonized plan for the neutralization of FDLR and the disengagement forces, lifting of defense security measures by Rwanda, the operationalization of reinforced ad hoc verification mechanisms on 5th November 2024, the adoption of the concept of Operation CONOPS, and the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding between the Government of Angola and MONUSCO on the 23rd November 2024 towards supporting the reinforced ad hoc verification mechanism grounds operation. The divergence regarding the resolution of M23 issue is the only pending matter to finalize and consolidate the draft peace agreement. This has caused the postponement of the Angola-DRC-Rwanda summit that was scheduled to take place in Luanda, Angola on 15 December, bringing together His Excellency Felix Tshisekedi, President of the Republic of DRC, and His Excellency Paul Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda. In his unwavering commitment to continue consultation to advance the Luanda process, His Excellency João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço sent a message to His Excellency President Paul Kagame on 18 December, which was delivered by His Excellency Ambassador Tete Antonio, Minister of External Relations of Angola. We remain hopeful that the parties will be able to overcome any remaining differences and reach an agreement to end the conflict in the eastern DRC. We need to continue supporting and encouraging them to resolve this last challenge in this long and difficult peace process. Third, the way forward. His Excellency João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço has reiterated time and time again that the conflict and security challenges in the eastern DRC have no military solution, though he urged the parties to return to the negotiating table immediately. We need speedy and unconditional de-escalation of the conflict and genuine and renewed engagement of the parties to explore ways of overcoming the pending issue and reschedule the aforementioned tripartite summit. It means that the concerned party must cooperate, engage, respect, and comply with the decision reached within the Luanda process framework. The strict observance of the ceasefire agreed upon between the parties and the immediate cessation of all hostilities are paramount to creating a political environment conducive to a peaceful solution under the Luanda and Nairobi processes. We encourage all parties to avoid any actions or rhetoric that can further escalate tensions, including provocative language or inflammatory public statement, which is counterproductive to the diplomatic efforts to achieve a lasting solution to this conflict that has prevailed for so long. Let's conclude by reiterating the firm commitment of His Excellency João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço, President of the Republic of Angola, as the facilitator mandated by the African Union to assist in the quest for peace and security in the Eastern DRC. I thank you for your attention.
I thank the representative of Angola for this statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Uruguay.
Thank you very much. Uruguay would like to thank Algeria in its capacity as President of the Security Council for convening this emergency meeting on the worsening security situation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, particularly in the region of North Kivu and South Kivu, and in relation to the advance of the M23 movement. Our country expresses its deep concern at the escalating violence that continues to affect this region as a consequence, with devastating consequences for the civilian population and for the operation of MONUSCO. We profoundly regret the loss of human lives, including the blue helmets there with the mission to protect the most vulnerable. In this context, Uruguay regrets the loss of one of our soldiers and the injuries suffered by another 4 in an operation in North Kivu. And we express our solidarity with the losses suffered also by South Africa and Malawi. We extend our condolences to the families of all victims, and we reaffirm our commitment to international peace and security. We thank other members of this council for the condolences they've expressed to us. In MONUSCO, Uruguay plays a role focused on ensuring strict compliance with the civilian protection mandate. We underscore that our Uruguayan troops do not participate in offensive operations limited specifically to actions under the mandate of the operation, and we are strictly neutral with regard to the internal clashes within the Democratic Republic of the Congo. We call on the Security Council, and particularly those members which have direct influence on the region, to step up their efforts to reach an immediate ceasefire and ensure that the involved parties can come back to the negotiating table. We underscore the importance of the continuing Luanda and Nairobi processes. We believe that they should be strengthened and lead to concrete headway to achieve a political, sustainable solution to this conflict. We also extend this appeal to all countries in the region to refrain from any action that might aggravate the situation and to positively cooperate to find this political solution. In this context, Uruguay reiterates its steadfast commitment to peace in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and our full support for MONUSCO at these critical times. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Uruguay for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of South Africa.
Mr. President, South Africa wishes to thank you and the members of the United Nations Security Council for convening this meeting to consider as a matter of urgency the deteriorating security and humanitarian situation in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. We thank USG Jean-Pierre Lacroix, SRSG Bintou Keita, and ASG Joyce Msuya for their briefing. I also wish to acknowledge the presence of Minister Therese Kayikwamba-Wagner in this chamber. It is with profound regret that this meeting is taking place at a time when a number of peacekeepers have lost their lives and many others injured in the line of duty. 9 of these fallen peacekeepers are South Africans who showed immense bravery amidst relentless attacks from the M23. These attacks from the M23 are in violation of the ceasefire that was brokered through the Luanda process. We deplore the unwarranted attacks against MONUSCO and the South African Development Community Mission in the DRC's uniformed personnel who are deployed not only to promote peace, security, and stability in the Eastern DRC, but by extension in the African continent in general. Our sincere condolences go out to the families of those peacekeepers who have lost their lives, and we wish a speedy recovery to those injured. The cost of being a UN peacekeeper should never be this high. This Security Council has passed many resolutions that provide clear guidance on such violations carried out against peacekeepers. The Security Council must take decisive action against callous acts aimed at undermining its role and decisions aimed at maintenance of international peace and security. This Council must send a clear message that peacekeepers' lives matter. We must value and safeguard the contribution of those entrusted to carry out the mandates adopted in this chamber. Excellencies, it is concerning that the fundamental principle of sovereignty and territorial integrity enshrined in the UN Charter are being eroded and continue to be violated globally, including in the Eastern DRC, with the evident known and well-reported presence of external forces destabilizing that country. It is crucial for the Rwandan Defense Forces to cease support to the M23, and for the M23 to immediately cease all hostile actions and withdraw from occupied territories. We cannot accept a world wherein non-state actors are armed to do the will of other states, while those states refuse to accept responsibility for unnecessary armed violence and potential war crimes. Peacekeeping as a tool will be rendered ineffective when the peacekeepers and peacekeeping operations face complex political situations, such as that in the Eastern DRC, when other states get militarily involved in fueling conflict. The international community can no longer afford to simply watch as conflict in the Eastern DRC continues to displace, maim, and kill innocent civilians. The current situation in the Eastern DRC requires decisive action from the international community led by this Council. The Security Council must use the tools at its disposal to act against those who perpetuate the conflict in the Eastern DRC, including calling for their withdrawal from the DRC. There must also be a resumption of both the Luanda and Nairobi processes to find a lasting political solution to the cyclical conflict in the Eastern DRC. South Africa commends His Excellency João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço, President of the Republic of Angola, in his capacity as the African Union Champion for Peace and Reconciliation in Africa, for his tireless work on the Luanda process. We urgently call on the relevant parties to engage in this process with the view to agree a negotiated settlement that includes peace and stability in the entire Great Lakes region and in the African continent at large. And for its part, South Africa will continue to play a constructive role in promoting peace and stability in Eastern DRC and the entire continent, including through peacekeeping efforts. I thank you.
I thank the representative of South Africa for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Burundi.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. My delegation welcomes the opportunity to participate in this briefing on the worsening security situation in the DRC convened by the Algerian presidency of the Council this month. We further welcome here the presence of Her Excellency Ms. Keita Wagner, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the DRC, and we recognize the quality of the briefings made by Ms. Bintou Keita, UN SRSG for the DRC and head of MONUSCO, Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix, Under Secretary General for Peace Operations, and Ms. Joyce Msuya, Assistant Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Deputy Emergency Relief Coordinator. The Burundian government expresses its condolences to the Congolese people and government following the murder of the governor of North Kivu, General Chiriwami, and to the families and countries of the Blue Helmets and the Sami RDC personnel who lost their lives. Burundi underscores that the worsening security situation in eastern DRC, where the deterioration continues, doesn't only threaten local peace and stability, but also poses a challenge to maintaining international security, which is central to this Council's mission. Burundi firmly supports the respect for peaceful coexistence between nations and categorically rejects proxy wars. Eastern DRC has all too often fallen victim to conflicts fueled by foreign interests, exacerbating local tensions and eroding peace efforts. Burundi welcomes the Luanda and Nairobi processes. These represent crucial frameworks to enable a swift de-escalation of the crisis. These regional initiatives, supported by the African Union and the international community, set out a clear roadmap to reach a lasting ceasefire. The United Nations, through the invaluable work of the DRC group of experts, has documented the dynamics of this conflict in detail. These reports stressed the involvement of foreign actors in supporting local armed groups, as well as flagrant violations of human rights, systematic plundering of the DRC's resources. Such events cannot be overlooked. It's imperative for this Council to demand concrete steps to bring an end to this interference and to guarantee full respect for the sacrosanct principles of international law and international humanitarian law. Burundi notes that the United Nations has published no end of reports on the security situation in the DRC, and those responsible for the conflict in the DRC are known. The lower profile perpetrators of the conflict are also known and denounced in these various reports. The fundamental principles set out in the United Nations Charter, which guide and drive the action of the United Nations, are known to the entire world, and yet the Security Council remains silent. Not a single resolution condemning the perpetrators of the flagrant violations of the principles of national sovereignty and the territorial integrity of the DRC. These principles must be firmly reiterated in the context of the DRC. The integrity of its territory cannot be compromised, and armed incursions as well as repeated violations of its borders must end immediately. Silent and no resolution on the violations of the basic principles of international humanitarian law. Consequently, it's relevant to ask, what is the hidden message behind the Council's silence? What could it be? The question remains open, unanswered by the Security Council. The city of Goma continues to stand on the edge of a precipice. A military escalation reaching this city would have catastrophic humanitarian and security consequences, not only for the DRC, but for the entire region. This Council must not remain a bystander to this looming tragedy. In this regard, Burundi urges the Council to 1. Call for an immediate cessation of hostilities in the eastern DRC and to guarantee this territory does not become a terrain for indirect confrontation between regional and international actors. 2. Support the efforts of the Luanda and Nairobi processes by demanding respect for the commitments made by all parties. 3. Support the DRC's authorities in their efforts to restore the state's authority across all of its territory. 4. Demand the withdrawal of the forces attacking the DRC and the cessation of hostilities, and support the resumption of the Luanda and Nairobi processes. 5. increased support to civilian populations and to those displaced by war so as to meet their basic needs, with particular attention being given to women and children. Finally, the Security Council must heed the legitimate demands of the people and government of the DRC by acting decisively to guarantee that the DRC can fully exercise its sovereignty and restore peace. Security and stability in Central Africa and beyond are at stake. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Burundi for the statement. Her Excellency Ms. Therese Kaikwamba Wagner, State Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Cooperation and Francophonie of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, has asked for the floor to make a further statement. I gave her the floor.
Merci pour la parole.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Excellency, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, members of the Council, today there won't be any refutation or response to the comments and the awkward attempts by Rwanda to say nothing about the inexcusable attacks against the edifice of multilateralism and international law, and the attacks against the value of human life that it is conducting in Goma. The response to the Rwandan aggression and its maneuvers of diversion should come from this council, which should assume fully its responsibilities and cease to look away. Too many lives have been sacrificed. Too many principles have been trampled on. Rwanda is continuing in its terror and plunder and contempt for the United Nations and the resolutions of this council. Impunity cannot continue without striking a fatal blow to the credibility of the United Nations. The time for hesitation has passed. Time now is for action. Thank you.
I thank Her Excellency Ms. Kaikwamba Wagner for her statement. The representative of Rwanda has asked for the floor to make a further statement. I give him the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to clearly say that this crisis is a DRC matter. That's why we have the Rwanda process and the Nairobi process. DRC has had endemic security, political, and governance challenges for decades. These matters are not matters of today. So it cannot pretend that an external party will be responsible for putting its house in order. On the issue of territorial integrity, we agree DRC's territorial integrity matters, but Rwanda's territorial integrity is also very important. For the last 3 decades, instability, attacks, infiltration, sharing, and loss of life due to armed groups' activities on Rwandan territory have come singularly from across the border from DRC. Why is DRC preserving FDLR, making it a strategic ally? DRC must disengage, neutralize, and completely expel FDLR from its territory so that we can have peace. The minister earlier mentioned on the issue of the deployment of the Rwandan liaison officers to the enhanced verification mechanism in Goma. The reason the 3 Rwandan liaison officers have not deployed is because DRC clearly refused to guarantee their safety and security. So as soon as DRC guarantees their security, they will be able to cross to Goma and be part of the enhanced verification mechanism. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Rwanda for his statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Kakikwamba Wagner, who asked for a further statement.
Thank you once again, Mr. President. I'm going to be brief. I take note, and I think the entire Council has taken note of the fact that Rwanda has put into question the credibility of the group of experts, the credibility of a special representative of the Secretary General, and the credibility of yourselves, members of the Security Council, who denounced the presence of the Rwandan armed forces on the sovereign territory of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It's up to you to draw the consequences of this contempt and lack of respect. I want to clarify something regarding the reinforced ad hoc verification mechanism. Rwanda received a note verbal on the eve of the establishment of this mechanism, guaranteeing the security of all its elements that will be deployed there. However, they're still trying to find their way to Goma, 82 days since that mechanism was established. Thank you.
I thank Her Excellency Ms. Kakikwamba Wagner for the statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. I now invite Council members to informal consultations to continue our discussion on the subject. The meeting is adjourned.
Amahoro amahoro abakunzi ba East African Daily Update, twongeye kubana nanone nyuma y'iyi briefing turi kumwe nyuma y'iyi briefing cyangwa se iyi Security Council briefing. Ndagira ngo mbasuhuze kandi mbifurize icyumweru cyiza, weekend nziza. Ngo icyumweru mvuga ni dimanche. Jean-Pierre turashimye rero, turi ku itariki ya 26 tukora nawe basezeraniye, ni itariki y'umushinga kwa mbere 26. Ntangiye kuvuga nanjye ntangiye kuvuga nka Rwamucyo, sinshaka kwimoka Rwamucyo kuko ntabwo nzi niba afite ubumuga cyangwa se mbese ari ukubera amazina yamugoye, ariko numva atigeze ashobora kuvuga FDLR na President Tshisekedi abo yise ngo ni FDR na President Kedi. So ntabwo nzi niba ari ukubera ari amazina agoye, ariko niba ari uburwayi mbabarire, kandi imbabazi zanjye rwose nzivuyanye ku mutima. Ariko ntabwo ndi bubatindire, ndagira ngo mbabwire utuntu dutoya yenda ku bantu batavuga ururimi rw'icyongereza. Bamwe mwagiye muvuga ngo kuki ntabasobanurira. Urabona ubu twari gukomeza nkajya mpozinga, hari abandi bavuga icyongereza bamvaga yenda bashaka kubyiyumvira mu rurimi bifuza. Ariko ijambo rya Madame Kakikwamba Thérèse Kakikwamba Wagner, Minisitiri w'Ububanyi n'Amahanga wa Congo, nzarigarukaho mu rurimi rw'igifaransa uko yaryivugiye kugira ngo muryumve. Ibya Rwamucyo mwaryiyumviye, statement aba akomeye cyane cyangwa se ziba zikomeye muri iki kiganiro, muri ibi ngibi kuri jyewe. Of course abantu 15 bose ni ngombwa, ariko nashaka kumva jyewe by'umwihariko permanent members icyo bavuga. Ngo ndavuga Amerika, Ubwongereza, Ubufaransa, Ubushinwa n'Uburusiya. Nashaka kumva ibyo bavuga, ariko ba bantu bavuze donc bandi bakunze kuvuga ngo Urusiya ngo ubwo bushobora gutanga genda ngo bufite position niyi ntabwo ushobora kubimenya mu by'ukuri yenda ibyo bavuga inyuma n'ibyo bavugira ahangaha twumvise ni ibintu bitandukanye. Ikintu gusa twavanyemo ahangaha ni uko hari ibihugu bimwe byariye iminwa. Kimwe muri byo ni bya bindi bise ngo ni niba ari +8 babandi barahagarariwe na Sierra Leone, Ghana irimo, Nigeria numvise irimo, ariko navuze ni Afrika warakubititse kweri. Dore icyo twazize nicyo ngiki. Nicyo twazize. Bo banarekomandaga ibya Nairobi hari kuruta n'ibya Angola. Ariko reka mbabwire mpereye ku byo bavuze MONUSCO ubwayo. Bintou Keita yavuze ko bari trapped. Ngo ndavuga utuntu dukeya cyane dushoboka mu byo bavuze dushobora kuba mbese jewe nashaka kumva namwe kandi mushobora kuba ntekereza ko namwe kufuza kumenya. Bavuze ko MONUSCO ingabo za UN ziri muri Congo ziri trapped, mbese ni nkaho zifatiwe cyangwa se ziragotewe hagati, ku buryo kujyana ibikorwa by'ubutabazi ku bantu bibagoye, bitoroshye, badashobora no kuba ko bishobora kubigeraho. By the way, ntarakomeza ndaza kubabwira updates uko zihagaze mbere yuko nsoza amakuru makeya mfite y'imirwano. Ntabwo ari menshi. Intambara yatangiye saa 10 za nijoro, yabaye ubu ngubu hari calme mu mujyi wa Goma ndetse n'ahandi kuri front y'imirwano. Ariko ibyo ndabivuga ndangije kubabwira ibi maze kubabwira ibi mbese muri make ndashaka kubabwira ibyo bavuze ko bari trapped ingabo za UN ndetse ariko badashobora mbese kugeza ibikorwa by'ubutabazi aho bikwiriye kugera. Urumva ko ni ikibazo gihangayikishije buri muntu wese ukurikirana iyi mirwano yo kuri Goma, kuko MONUSCO ubundi yagombye kuba irengera gusa inyungu z'abaturage. Ubufaransa je nabuciye amazi, bavuze ngo force is not an option here, mbese ko gukoresha ingufu atari option. Ibyo barabivuga. Ufunze amaboko kugeza uyu munsi ni Congo, right? Congo niyo ifunze amaboko, ariko ntabwo abandi bose u Rwanda rurimo rurinjira, nta muntu winjira. Congo ntabwo bigeze binjira muri territoire ya Rwanda. U Rwanda nirwo rwinjiye muri territoire ya Congo. Barongera baravuga ngo igisubizo gihari ni political not military. No kuvuga ngo ni icya gisirikare nako ni icya politike, ariko ntabwo ari gisirikare. So bari bari peace +8 something aribo bahagarariwe na Sierra Leone batinze ku masezerano ya Nairobi. Ntabwo yatinze cyane ko bayavuze mu buryo nyine wumva ko barekomanda ari amasezerano ya Nairobi, ariko bikwereka ko nyine byemwe nababwira ko Afrika yarakubititse. Dore ni icyo ngicyo nyine bazabo nibo bahagarariye ibihugu 8 bihagarariwe n'umuntu umwe wa Sierra Leone, aho kugira ngo bavemo aribo bantu bavuga bati twebwe nk'abanyafrika twashatse by'ibisubizo politiki by'ibibazo politiki byo muri Afrika tubinyujije muri African Union, cyane cyane ko perezida wa Rwanda ari we mu muhuza, kandi African Union yahaye iyo mandate, s'il vous plaît, right? Nibo bashizeho iyo mandate, baravuga ngo uwo niwe muhuza. Biriya bya Nairobi muzi uko byabaye, impamvu gembe irwanya, impamvu ntanabitindaho cyane, ni bya bindi bavuze ngo bavuze ko imitwe yose irwana imwe yemeye kuva mu mirwano, yemera gukorana na Congo. U Rwanda rwonyine nirwo umutwe warwo wanze kuganira, kandi birumvikana. Si umutwe w'u Rwanda uganira gute mu biganiro bya Congo? Iyo M23 irabizi ko nijya Nairobi nta kindi kizaba gikurikiye uretse kuba demobiliza na reintegration no kubashyira mu buzima busanzwe bakajya guhinga cyangwa se korora, kuko nabyo ntibyabagwa nabi, ariko ntabwo bashaka, kuko bo umugambi ni kudeta nk'uko Nanga na Kagame nyine babishaka. Natangajwe nsubiye inyuma gatoya cyangwa nihuse kuri uriya Rwamucyo uvuga ngo ngo umuperezida bavuze ko ngo azadukuraho. Yarabivuze aramaze. None se niba yarabivuze, mwebwe yabivugiye iki kwanza? Number one, yabivuze kubera ko mwateye igihugu cye. Mwebwe murabivuga mukanashyiraho n'abasirikare bagiye kubikora, right? Bo mwebwe murafata mugafata M23 na bananga, muti twebwe tubari inyuma, mugende muhindura ubutegetsi. Nanga bivuga ku mugaragaro, mugahamuha n'ingabo zikajya kubikora, n'ingabo zanyu zikajya kubikora muri Kongo. Undi wahagaze hakurya y'umupaka arabwira ati kwera imyitwarire yanyu, ubutegetsi bwanyu bugomba guhinduka. Ninde ugomba kubazwa byinshi? Mwanjije imwe. Noneho rero nahoze nse umuntu wambwiye bazuvuga ngo ndatukana hari cyangwa se ngo umusaza niba ngo no kubeshya, nkibaza ariko umuntu wo mu Rwanda kweli ashobora kuvuga ngo abasaza babeshya, wahera kuri Kagame ukajya kuri Tito Rutaremara ukajya kuri abasaza mu Rwanda. Jewe ntimuzajye mungereranya kwanza nabo ngabo. Ugize Nyagasani ukagira iyo ethics nazi izo ndangagaciro, reka tugiye dukomeze ku kiganiro cyacu, ariko no nuko ntukanye nkabyibuka ibyo bintu bavuga byo gutukana. Ntabwo ntukana no ntabwo ubundi ndi utukana nakora ibirenze. Noneho abo ba 8 ni bari P cyangwa +8, abo bantu aho batashyize imbere bakavuga bati twebwe nka UN, nka African Union nako twashyizeho umuntu uzadufasha muri ibyo bintu, nibo bantu ba mbere barimo guca intege ibyo biganiro, bakatangira kuvuga batinda ku bya yavuze nyine ku masezerano ya Nairobi atayatandukanye neza nkaho ari ibintu bishobora gukorera mu buryo buri paralele. No, I mean bishobora kuba paralele yenda ko kimwe gifite imwe gishinzwe ntigishinzwe, ariko ntabwo bikora bimwe at the same time. No. Noneho Etazini yashimiye MONUSCO kurinda umujyi wa Sake na Goma kuba bitafashwe, by the way no kugera kuri uyu munsi gusa, ariko ntabwo tuzi ejo uko bizaba bimeze. Ndetse inashimira kuba Perezida Lorenzo akomeje kubahuza, ariko anashimira na effort. Ntabwo yavuze recommendation, ariko yashimiye effort, ubushake ashyiramo ndetse n'umusanzu we kugira ngo ashake amahoro. Ariko kuri Rwanda at least ari gukomeza nongere subira inyuma, aya masezerano cyangwa ibintu barimo kuvuga ni diplomasi. Ntabwo mvuga ko ari ibintu bihambaye cyane, ariko njyewe ndashima cyane yuko habamo amagambo ari strong, kubera ko babwira ni Kagame abyumve, kuko nawe arashaka abanzi, arashaka n'inshuti, amenye umwanzi we, apana findi turashaka so araroga. Noneho ikintu batinze yakomeje kugarukaho kandi na Etazini nayo yavuzeho ni ikintu cya May, ngo birashoboka, of course ni langage diplomatique, bishobora kuvamo ibyaha by'intambara, war crime. So, muri ibi bintu turaza kugera ku byo Therese nako Kayikwamba yavuze, naramuka basi ibyo yasabye babihaye Kongo, birashoboka ko mushobora kumva na Kagame yagiye kuri war crime, yabaye nka biriya bya Bashar, yabaye nka biriya bya byenda bakavuga, by the way na Prime Minister wa Israel nawe byagiyeho. So, ibyo bintu biramutse bibaye, you understand ko iyi council nubwo abantu benshi bayisuzugiye bati ni ibigambo byaba biri huge, yaba ari ikintu gikomeye cyane. Hanyuma Kongo rero abandi ndabasimbutse bamwe. Kongo yafashe umwanya wo ya silence, moment of silence, ariko hari amagambo amwe yagiye avuga agaragaza ko batazarebera. Yavuze ati mwitegure humanitarian crisis cyangwa se disaster, catastrophe. N'ibyago bishobora kwibasira abantu, abaturage muri hariya muri Kongo. Yabivuze nabiteze amatwi. Mwitegure. Ntabwo yavuze muri iryo jambo, yavuze ati ibigiye kubaho bishobora kuzana iyo catastrophe. So, ibyo avuga arabizi kuko u Rwanda ntabwo rushaka kuvirira, kandi nabo nyine urumva inzira zose barazigerageje, inzira zose barazinyuzemo, buri kintu cyose cyaciye muri bakoresheje diplomasi, bakoresha buri kintu cyose, ariko urabona ko u Rwanda rwamaze kunangira. Hari ibintu bavuze, biriya bintu byo niba ari spoofing, biriya bintu byo gukata za signals, GPS, mbese biriya bintu biyobora indege kugira ngo bigere hariya muri mbese mu kirere cya Goma cyangwa se muri Nord Kivu. Avuga ko biriya ari violation ya arms embargo. No kuvuga ngo kwera kujya ku interfere cyangwa se kwivanga cyangwa se kuyobya cyangwa kuhungabanya umutekano w'ikirere, ko binyuranyije cyangwa se ko binyuranyije na ariya masezerano abuza ubucuruzi bw'imbunda cyangwa se kugura imbunda. Nge ndibaza ko biraza kugaruka hasi. Icyo yabivugiye, there is a reason yabivuze, nuko arimo yenda byari mu byo yasabye, nyuma reka nampite njya ku byo yasabye. Yavuze ati ubu ntabwo ari igihe, ntabwo tukiri muri cya gihe cyo kujya muvuga ngo declarations of concerns, kuvuga mbese mukandika mukavuga muti duhangayikishijwe. Yavuze ati ibyo ntabwo ari cyo gihe turimo ubu ngubu. Dore ibyo dusabira u Rwanda. Aka kanama turasabira u Rwanda ibihano. Ibyo bihano bikaba birimo kwandika ikintu cyitwa amabuye y'agaciro yose avuye muri Kongo, bakandika ko, bagateraho kashe ko atemewe, bakavuga ko atemewe gucuruzwa. That's one. Icya kabiri, avuga ko u Rwanda bagomba kurukuraho biriya, abisaba ko u Rwanda bagomba kurukuraho buriya kuriya kujyana ingabo zabo ngo gushakira amahoro isi. Icya gatatu, kugura intwaro, barukomanyirize kugura intwaro. Icya kane, yavuze chapter 7, ubu ningira amahirwe kuzaganira na Dr. Kambanda. Iyi niyo tuzagaruka kuko ntabwo nyizi, ntabwo nzi bikubiyemo mu by'ukuri, ntabwo ngiye kwirarira. So iyo ntabwo nzi kirimo. Ariko rero yabasabiye ko nabyo iyo chapter 7 iba applied nayo ubwayo. Ndumva yarayivuze ariko ntabwo nyibuka. So iyo chapter 7 ya UN. So ibyo bintu bine, ibihano birimo embargo ya minerals zivuye mu Rwanda zose, ko bagomba gushyiraho label ivuga ngo ntabwo zemerewe kugurishwa. Zose ntabwo ari iziva muri Kongo, bavuze bati zose, kubera ko nyine ntawamenye izivuye muri Kongo n'izivuye ahandi. So icyo ni kimwe. Icya kabiri nabibabwiye, ingabo kugura imbunda, kubakomanyiriza kugura imbunda, ndetse na chapter 7. Ni ibyo ngibyo. Ubwo ibindi bya chapter 7 sinzi bikubiyemo, ibyo ni ibintu tuzaganiraho cyangwa twaganiraho n'ababifitiyeho ubumenyi. Ibyo nibyo yasabye, kandi simvuga ko badashobora kubimuha. Sinzi ko bashobora kubimuha byose, ariko nabiriya byo kuvuga ngo war crimes, ibyaha by'intambara byagiye bigarukwaho n'abantu benshi, nabyo nawe yabivuzeho, ariko nibaza ko nabyo bizaba biri muri package. Noneho rero Burundi sorry. U Rwanda, reka njye ku Rwanda. Nafashe note mvuga ntashobora kuvuga FDLR na dukuntu yakoze pronunciation ngo President Felix Kedi. I don't know. Ariko hari umuntu nabajije niba afite ubumuga, ubwo nasabye imbabazi muri mu kiganiro, ariko niba atari ubumuga agomba kujya akora pratique akamenya ko iryo jambo riri bugaruke akaryiga akarisubiramo wenyine tukaza kurivuga. Hanyuma ikintu cyanshekeje cyo ku Rwanda yavuze umubare w'abarundi ingabo z'u Burundi ziri muri Kongo. Harya mwavuze ngo ntitugatukane, ariko mvuze ko ari ubujiji. Muvuga yuko ari murashaka kumbwiye okay, murashaka kumbwira yuko mu by'ukuri murashaka kumbwira yuko aba bantu, what do you say, ibintu byo kuvuga ngo ingabo z'u Burundi cyangwa se za Tanzania zahe ibyo bibareba hiki s'il vous plaît? Bibareba hiki? Noneho avuga na za drones ngo ziri hafi y'umupaka, ni mu gihugu cyabo, hari ikibuga cy'indege kiri aho, drone ngo ntizishobora gukora patrouille aho ngaho. Kandi by the way UN ifite za drones ntago bazivuga. Ikibazo bafite ni ukubera ari Kongo, ako gasuzuguro giye karanyica cyane. Ngo noneho arongera ngo baregreta, bababajwe nuko ngo UN ngo itigeze ngo ikondana yamagana ngo Kongo, ngo ari Kongo ikamagana ngo FARDC ngo ariko ikamagana ngo M23, bya bindi byo kujya bayivugira mbese kwerekana ko ari bo nyine koko. So ngo impamvu Kagame atagiye muri Angola ngo cyari kumujyana no kujya gusinya amasezerano, ngo ariko ngo nta masezerano ngo yari ahari ko baga baturumvikana kugira ngo basinye amasezerano. Angola mbese hari ibintu yagiye agarukaho ukarasanga ni nka Kagame wamuhaye ya discours, uretse ko bambwiye ko amakuru yambwiye ko ngo bakabare bari bamubwiye ngo ibyo kuvuga rwose ngo ari babimwandikiye, ngo n'ibyo gusubiza yabimwandikiye, umuntu yabimbwiraga live. Hanyuma Angola yonyine yavuze nk'umuhuza, ntabwo yabaye, so ntabwo yavuze nk'umuhuza, ntabwo yigeze yavuga byinshi cyane. Hanyuma South Africa yavuze neza cyane, ivuga uburyo butwari nyine bw'ingabo zabo ni za SAMI DRC zagerageje zarwanye zikakumira biriya bitero, ndetse mu kugerageza gukora nyine ibyo ibyo UN yategetse. Ariko yanasabye ko bakoresha tools zose bafite, bakoresha ububasha bafite bwose buri mu ntoki zabo kugira ngo bakimure bagire ibyo bakora. Icyo ni ikintu kiri important kuko barazifite. Na Amerika yavuze ngo bakoreshe ngo tools za diplomasi, ariko n'izindi zose ziri available to them. Burundi bwasabye nabo kutarebera, u Rwanda rwongeye kuza kugaruka gusubiza rusaba irindi jambo, baravuga ngo bavuga ko nyine bya binyoma byabo ntabwo ngiye mbyumva, bavuga ngo babuze ukuntu bavuga mbese ko bavuga ko ngo ingabo zabo zabuze ngo Kongo ntiyigeze baha garanti y'umutekano ko abantu babo bazagira umutekano. Denis Kayikwamba arababwira ati twabahaye na note verbale ibabwira ko umutekano wabo uzitabwaho. Donc ibinyoma byabo biteye ubwoba. Mbere yuko nkora updates kuko izo mperuka hari hashizwe ibintu biba birahinduka, byahindukaga buri mwanya, abantu baratekereza yuko donc ni mugoroba bashobora kugaruka situation aho ikomeze. Okay, intambara yatangiye mu gitondo murabizi ko twari kumwe yatangiye kare cyane nka saa 10 bari batangiye kwinjira banyuze kuri borne ya 13 murabyibuka ko umuntu wacu rwose yabivuze rugikubita ariko avuga ko bambukiye kandi neza batihisha batiyoberanyije, munyihanganire amasegonda make, batiyoberanyije banyura kuri iyo borne. Ubu rero naho amakuru mbafitiye nuko naho bamaze kuhashyira deployment, bamaze kuhashyira abasirikare, ariko ndagira ngo mbabwire ikintu kimwe. Iyi mirwano mumaze kumenyerana, ngo mumaze kuba expert b'imirwano kubera uburyo tubimazemo igihe. Iyo RDF bateye ahantu bakirirwa barwana, strategy zabo kuva na kera ariko ntabwo ari iby'uyu munsi, nuko bariya biriwe barwana barabacyura bakajya kuruhuka, inkomere zikagenda, bahamutse bakagenda, mu gitondo ubu bariho barabadirisha, barimo barazana abandi bari fresh. Ikibazo mfite kuri Kongo nabwo nibaza ko simbizi, ariko sinzi iyo systeme nabo ni bariyo bakoresha, kuko buri gihe simbizi, ntabwo mbizi niba bavanamo bakomeretse gusa bagasigamo abandi bazima, ariko ubundi bagombye kujya bahinduranya, ubundi niyo principe yanagafashije. Ni nayo mpamvu mbivuga ko ubu ngubu ntabwo navuga ngo kubera ko babakumiriye yenda ejo mu gitondo ntibari bubyuke bagarutse, keretse niba bagiye kuva ahangaha, ko inama igiye gukomeza ahangaha muri Security Council, bakabatelefona bakabwira ati Kagame tugiye gushyiraho ibihano, simbizi, yenda agasubira inyuma cyangwa se agakomeza agasoma impyisi, nk'uko nawe babwiye ko yiyemeje gusoma impyisi, noneho akajya gukomeza gufata Goma niba abifitiye ububasha. Ukuri nuko ikibuga cy'indege M23 RDF M23 ni itangazo gusa n'umunwa, ariko RDF yagifunze. Ikibuga cy'indege kirafunze, ngo mu mpamvu yatumye bagifunga ngo nuko ngo barimo ngo bagikoresha ngo gupakiramo intwaro ngo FDLR ngo barimo ngo barimo barapakira intwaro ngo muri ngo mu kibuga cya Goma. Reka nze nyibahe iyo communique. Iriya baravuga ko ari fake news. Okay, here we go. N'iki ngiki aho bavuze ko ngo ikirere cya Goma, cyo mu kirere cya Goma gifunze, ngo ingabo za Kongo mbese nabo bafatanyije ngo barimo barakoresha icyo kibuga cy'indege ngo gupakiramo amabombe yo kwica abasivile. Mwumve aba bantu, my gosh, donc bagomba gushyiramo pretext Yep, bakaba mbese ngo barimo baragipakiramo ngo amabombe. Ese nta handi bayapakirira? Lasami DRC ngo barabahagara, bindi nibyo kuba ngo bareke gukomeza gukorana. Uzi ko ntabwo nayibasharinze. 1 second. Siko abantu bagutera umujinya. Tekereza ngo ikirere cya Goma ngo kirafunze, ngo ingabo za Kinshasa nabo bafatanyije ngo baragikorera bakoresha ikibuga cy'indege cya Goma ngo kugira ngo bapakire amabombe ngo yo kwica abaturage. Donc batangiye kubarega genocide, nako kubica. Ubwo ni ukuvuga ngo bo ubwabo bashobora kuba bafite uwo mugambi ahari, simbizi, kuko ntabwo ibyo bintu murabizi ko atari ukuri. Amavideo menshi aratwereka situation uko imeze. Ibyo byose urumva ko bagomba gushaka impamvu nyine yatuma ntabwo bavuze gusa ngo kirafunze, ahubwo bongereyeho n'impamvu bavuga ko gifunze. Donc muri make ntabwo indege zirimo kugenda. Byatangiye saa 8 by the way, za nimugoroba, nibwo bahise bafunga icyo kibuga cy'indege. Kugifunga ntabwo ari ukuvuga ngo bagikandagiyemo, yenda ntaza gutuma mutekereza yuko binjiye muri icyo kibuga, ariko ni ukuvuga ngo bari muri pozisiyo yo kuba barasa indege, bari muri pozisiyo yo kuba barasa indege ziriho zikijyaho cyangwa se zigahagurukiyeho. So, ibyo rero ndibaza ko urumva ntago bashobora kubirengaho. Abantu bahajya, indege za gisivile ntizihajya, indege za gisirikare ubwo urumva zo nta nubwo zinahaba by the way, ziba muri Kavu, ariyo mpamvu Nkubito yagiyeyo. Bagiye kuzijya za drone, ariyo mpamvu ba Nkubito bagiye gushyira ingabo nyinshi hariya ngo barashaka naho kuhatera. Ibyo ni amakuru yizewe, mfitiye igihamya. So ubu rero M23 nako sinajye sinshaka kugwa muri iryo kosa, bashoboye kuyisubiza inyuma ntabwo ndimo kubabona, munyihangane. Okay, here we go. Nababonye. So M23 bashoboye, RDF bashoboye kuyisubiza inyuma ifatanyije of course na M23. Kanyamahoro niho habaye intambara yamaze umwanya munini cyane. Hari ahantu kuri iriya borne ya 14 na 13 amakuru yamugezeho yambwiye ko naho nyuma yo kubasubiza inyuma bahashyize uburyo bw'ubwirinzi, ndetse reka mbashyireho ijambo rya guverineri wungirije wa Congo, ndayikura kuri umukuru, donc vice guverineri wungirije, kurekura ku munyamakuru Stani Bujakera Chamala, noneho mbabwire icyo president ngo yababwiye. Okay, nababonaga ariko mwege ntimumbona, that's the problem.
Sur instruction du président de la République, chef de l'État, et commandant suprême des forces armées et de la police nationale congolaise, président de la République, chef de l'État et commandant suprême des forces armées et de la police nationale congolaise, tous les militaires, policiers, volontaires pour la défense de la patrie et autres agents des services de l'ordre et de sécurité de la garnison de Goma sont consignés et engagés armes à la main dans le combat pour la défense de la ville et donc du pays en entier. Et cela, chacun sous le commandement de sa hiérarchie. Il y va de l'honneur et de la souveraineté de notre pays. C'est pour cela que j'appelle donc tous les concernés à demeurer vigilants, combatifs et déterminés à défendre la patrie en général et la ville de Goma en particulier, afin de repousser avec énergie l'agresseur rwandais jusqu'au sacrifice suprême. La patrie ou la mort. Fait à Goma le 26 janvier 2025.
Ok.
Sur instruction du président de la République, chef de l'État.
Ok. So, bose hamwe, zalendo, abapolisi, abagisirikare, uretse ko no mu Rwanda niko bimeze mu by'ukuri, bari ku rugamba, babwiwe kujya ku rugamba bakarwanya umwanzi kugeza bamugejeje hanze, bamushubije kure cyane hanze ya Goma, ndetse no kugarantisa umutekano w'ubusugire cyangwa se ubusugire bw'igihugu cya Kongo. Bavandimwe rero, ibi bintu birakomeye,
narababwiye umuntu uri mu Rwanda hari abantu bagiye babyandika neza babivuga neza bati i Rwanda barabivuga nk'aho barimo bogeza umupira kubera ko batazi ikibategereje kubera ko batazi urubategereje Kagame arabizi no mu maso ye biragaragara nabonye n'aha ngaha barimo hari abantu bamwe bari aho cyakora ndiho ndatekereza ko bashobora kuba ari hanze ntabwo nibaza ko umuntu uri mu Rwanda yagira ivogonyo nka ririya kubera ko yaba muri sous informé mwaba nta makuru mugira niba mutekereza ko ibi bintu biri burangire gutya gusa ntibishoboka mwakwinjira Goma mutayinjiramo mugakomeza mugatsimbara kuri mukomeza mukayisuffocatinga mukayishyira mu kato byose biraza kuba agatogo mu Rwanda rw'Agasabo biraza kuba agatogo ntabwo ari byo mbifuriza ariko umutegetsi wanyu nibyo yabahamagariye nibyo yiyakuruye nibyo yikururiye kandi impamvu abikora ntabwo ari ukubera ko ari inyungu zanyu niwe ku giti cye kubera azi amahano yakoze akavuga ati nindamuka nkoze izi concessions sinya amasezerano yo kuvana FDLR hariya n'abandi ndaba nsigaye ngiye kuba nk'akanaka mbese akavuga ati nanjye ngiye kuvaho muri ubu buryo ndakurahiye ko niba uri mu Rwanda wari ukwiriye kubabazwa wari ukwiye kubabazwa no kumva aya magambo cyangwa se n'iyi tension iri hariya kuko uyu mubabaro umaze igihe ukorerwa abasirikare nako abaturage ba Kongo ndafite ubwoba ndatinya ko ushobora kugera mu Rwanda mu minsi itari ya kera iminsi ya vuba Banyarwanda rero mureke kogeza ibi ntabwo ari byo kogeza umupira ariko Kagame twaguhaye imbuzi niba ariko nazita twarakuburiye turakubwira ati biraje imyaka ibaye 3 ugeze hahandi ugiye guhura n'igikuta wa munsi twakubwiraga ukaba ugiye kugera harabambwiraga ngo i Rwanda abajeneho ngo bamwe batangiye kubahamagara ngo baze bavuge ngo inama y'ukuntu bagomba kurwana ukuntu bagomba bavuge rumwe bagira inama babaye mu mirwano batagikora ibyo ntabwo ari ibyanjye sinshobora kubiverifiya ariko makuru numvise nuko nabo ubwabo ahubwo batabivugaho rumwe icyo ngicyo cyo ni icyanjye nicyo na verifiye nuko nabo ubwabo batabivugaho rumwe kuvuga ngo ikibuga cy'indege ntabwo cyafashwe ngo baragikontorora barakizengurutse no bavuze gusa ko kiri ko bafunze ikirere cyaho which means ko bashyira no gushyira imbunda hariya kiriya kibuga cy'indege cya aerodrome ya Gisenyi bakavuga ngo indege imanuka sinzi ko muzi Goma genda niyo mpamvu muvuga gutyo ariko niba uri mu Rwanda uri ku Gisenyi no kuri kariya kabuga kaho indege imanutse igiye kugwa hariya mu birere hariya ikibuga cy'indege kiri cya Goma kiri mu birere inyuma donc ya Virunga na birere nyine ntabwo nkeneye kubisobanura cyane ariko uko giteye neza bari ku Gisenyi barabizi bari Rubavu barabizi ko indege imanuka ni neza ikirere kiri kuri byanze bikunze ishobora kuba inanyura no mu Rwanda hariya irimo ziriya ndege za gisivile zimanuka ntabwo ari ibanga ntabwo ari ukuvuga ngo ni ukuvuga ngo u Rwanda ruvuze ngo ntidushake indege imanuka inzira y'indege ibipfuye kubera ko ni hahandi igomba kunyura mu kirere neza gifatanye n'u Rwanda niko bimeze ntabwo ari ukuvuga ngo ni ukwera ko bagisurroundinze nubwo babikora ariko ntabwo ariko bimeze so mu mirwano rero yabaye no na sake ariko ahantu habaye imirwano ikomeye cyane ahitwa Kanyamahoro aho niho hari defense ikomeye hari aho bigeze gusubiza inyuma FARDC ariko nyuma barongera bararenforcer babakurayo ndiho ndagerageza kuguma nandika kugira ngo ndebe niba hari icyahindutse so kugeza ubu nta cyahindutse so FARDC iracyari Kanyamahoro kandi niho hiriwe habera imbunda z'ubwoko bwose baravuga ko hari imbunda ngo zamaze ngo zigaragara zishinze koko muri Rubavu nazo zishobora kuba nyine zahungabanya iyo aterissage cyangwa se indege kugwa. So hariya rero ubwo nta byinshi ndi buvuge, imirwano iraye uko yabyutse, ntabwo u Rwanda rwashoboye kuguma mu bice batereyemo, n'ibyo bya Kanyamahoro babashubijwe inyuma. Bombe yaguye Kibati yangije, yisha abantu benshi cyane, kandi nako abantu batari benshi cyane ariko yabishe nabi cyane, hashyaga mwabonye, ntabwo nshaka kubishyira ahangahe amafoto. So Abanyarwanda, ibyo nibyo nari mbafitiye muri iki kiganiro, ngiye gukomeza kuyakurikirana. Haramutse hari ikintu gihindutse byumvikana ko byanze bikunze ngomba kubibabwira, byanze bikunze ndaza kubibabwira. Hari message gusa, hari message andika vuba vuba kuko ngiye gusohoka. Okay, ni message ivuga ko MONUSCO yamaze gushyiraho naho imbunda z'imizinga nazo artillery nako yuko nayo yiteguye gusubiza ibitero n'ibyo bikangisho bivuye inyuma. So urumva rero ibi byose katubitega amaso. Ndabwira Abanyarwanda ko bidasa neza, ntabwo bisa neza. Mwihangane, ubutegetsi bwanyu burababeshya, bakababeshya ko bakomeye. Isi yabahagurukiye mwese, isi yabahagurukiye. Harya ubwo niba isi yabahagurukiye mufite iki? Agaciro kanyu, agaciro kanyu rudasumbwa. Ndabarahiye, uzi ubwenge ngo imfubyi yumvira mu rusaku harya. Reka mbifurize gukomeza kugira weekend nziza. Abareba Super Bowl nako football, American football, mbifurize game nziza. Ndaza kugerageza kuba updatinga byanze bikunze. Mugire rero ibihe byiza. Ciao.